Okay, recorded. People are starting to come in now.
Okay, I am calling to order the regular bi-monthly meeting of the Marin Water Board of Directors for October 19th, 2021. Our first order of business is to call the roll.
Director Bragman.
Here.
Director Gibson.
Here.
Director Schmidt.
Here.
Vice President Russell.
Here.
And President Kohler.
I'm here. The next order of business is to adopt the agenda. My understanding is that there's been a suggestion that we might want to make some changes in the agenda, which is a little long tonight.
So President Kohler, I believe that we were proposing to move to continue the public hearing item to November 2nd. If the board's so inclined to do so, we can continue it to a date certain, and then we wouldn't need to renotice. We would have the public hearing at the next regular board meeting on November 2nd, as well as continue the item number 9, streamlining board of directors regularly scheduled meetings. We can move to November 2nd also.
Okay, so Molly, what's the best way to do this? I think we're looking for a motion.
A motion, yes, and a vote.
Okay.
I'll move approval of the agenda as modified. Second.
And I want to make sure, do we have any board comment on this item before I go to public comment item on it?
I would actually wait until we get there before we move it. If we may get done with this sooner, but
You can do that as well. You could, President Kohler and board members, you can keep the agenda, or you can choose to move the streamlining to the next meeting.
I'd
See
move.
where we are at that time and choose to continue the public hearing then.
I mean, I think it would be good to take up the ordinance tonight if we could, but I don't want to stress everybody out with it, but
Right.
I can, getting rid of the streamlining. Yeah. That's housekeeping.
Okay. I think I'm a little confused, Molly. Do we need to adopt the agenda now? Generally, we adopt the agenda as an approval item. Are you so what are you suggesting so we can adjust the motion and move on?
I'll suggest that the board make a motion to adopt the agenda with the continuation of item 9, and to revisit the issue of whether or not to continue the public hearing at a later time in the meeting.
Oh, okay. So even if we adopt the agenda with that,
Thank you.
we could still bring it back. Okay, perfect. So we have the motion. Do we have any further board comment on this item? Okay, before I call for a vote, do we have any public comment on this item, Terry?
There's one that's raised hand, Deli Woodring. Ms. Woodring?
It's a general question. It's not on this particular item right this minute, so.
Okay, so could you hold off then? Because right now we're just looking for comments on this item.
Yes.
Thank you. All right,
Okay.
do we have any public comments on this item?
Roger Roberts has his hand up. Mr. Roberts? Mr. Roberts?
No, I have no comment.
Okay,
Thank
so
you,
thank
Roger.
you.
All right, let's
There are
have a
no
roll call
further-
vote on this item, Terry.
Director Bragman?
Aye.
Director Gibson?
Aye.
Director Schmidt?
Aye.
Vice President Russell?
Aye.
And President Kohler.
Aye. All right, we are now moving on to public comment on items not on the agenda. Do we want to call on the woman who was just about to speak when I didn't let her speak on that one item?
Deli Woodring, please.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. I'm just asking you for agenda item number 3. If you could, when you start talking about it, tell us where it is. I don't understand where the location of this contract number 1937 is. If you could just explain that when you start talking about it. Thank you.
So in response to that, I'm going to suggest we pull 3 off of the consent calendar so we can have that conversation. Is that okay with everybody?
Sure.
Okay. Alrighty. Do we have any other public comment on items that are not on the agenda? I really want to
Yes.
emphasize for the public, we have many items that are on the agenda. You will have many opportunities to talk about them. So we're really only looking now for comments on items that are not agendized.
There are 5. Roger Roberts, Rick Adler, and Laura Ethel, please, in that order. Mr. Roberts?
I'll try to be brief. you can hear me, I presume.
Yes, sir.
Loud and clear.
First, I want to compliment the meeting that took place on Friday. I found it very informative and useful. And I think some real progress was made as a result of those conversations. So I want to compliment the board and the staff on that meeting on Friday. In that context, I would like to suggest that it might be useful for the water district to frame some of its planning around some standardization, if you will, of demand and supply. For example, you might create a graph that showed what the demand would be at 55 gallons per person per day. And you might also do that, pick a number at 100 gallons per person per day, which would help to frame, if you will, the actions that need to be taken, as well as what effects it has on supply, along with projections of increased population. And that doing that study would help frame, if you will, the actions that you need to plan going forward. So I just make that suggestion, and I don't know if that's already being done by staff, but that's something that occurred to me that I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roger.
Mr. Adler?
Yes, thank you. I also want to thank you for the meeting on Friday. I think it was very informative and very useful, and I would look forward to more of those. I propose that Marin Water partner with Marin Clean Energy and their solar builder partners to install 5 to 10 megawatts of solar electricity on 5 to 10 acres of star thistle and Scotch broom on the south-facing hillside of the watershed to connect to the grid to provide clean, green electricity for Marin Water's daily use, to desalinize the bay water by boiling it to steam and condensing it into pure water, leaving only the salt, which can be sold, nothing going back into the bay, and to provide an emergency power source for Marin when the long distance power lines go down. That brings our electricity from far away, and also to provide emergency power, so Marin Water's system can be managed in an emergency when the power goes down, say by an earthquake or firestorm somewhere or whatever. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Ethel, please. Ms. Ethel?
Okay, if you read yesterday about the death of Colin Powell, then perhaps you understand that the COVID-19 has changed a lot of things for people who are immune compromised. Secretary Powell was fully vaccinated, and yet he died from complications of COVID-19. And this could happen to a lot of people in Marin County. I know of 5 individuals in Central Marin who have multiple myeloma, as did Colin Powell. And when you think about the disability accommodations that people who are immune compromised may need, you will probably have to consider options that you never had to consider before COVID-19. And I would appreciate it if you would keep that in mind, especially when you start to have more meetings that are in person. There are a lot of people besides myeloma patients who are immune compromised, people who have autoimmune diseases, people who have had transplants, and a variety of other people that I may not even know about. But I encourage you to keep that in mind because it may be a long time before we can show up at an in-person meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ethel. The last two speakers, James Krajewski and Rosie Rogers. Mr. Krajewski, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, in the midst of a water crisis, the water district seems to be partially mucking up the crisis with the district's lack of transparency. The lack of transparency in some areas obscures aspects of the crisis, as well as muddies the board's response. It makes it difficult for users to understand, cooperate, and support district actions. Some of the obscurities are relatively minor. Take tonight's agenda. Basically, the attachment feels like a ream of paper without any tabs or dividers. To follow agenda items, users have to scroll through pages and pages of stuff to find just the one page that might refer to the next action item. It would be helpful to make the agenda material easy to find and follow. Moving on to a higher level of obscurity, the website sometimes operates with little transparency. Want to find some basic information such as how and where our water is being used in Marin? Good luck. It takes lots of time and energy to scroll through pages and pages of documents, and users ultimately may or may not find the basic information. A much more troubling lack of transparency arose last week when the board held a meeting without streaming it or providing a videotape or transcript. Yes, the public was allowed to attend, but during an ongoing health crisis and with an hours-long daytime meeting, many of the public could not attend. From a practical standpoint, the public was largely excluded and the optics of the situation are quite bad. Why in the midst of a severe water crisis would the board opt for even the possibility of giving the appearance of hiding or obscuring its deliberations or actions? A company in crisis with nothing to hide should choose transparency and education to reach its goals. Trust and cooperation do not follow when there is a perception of possible obfuscation. To get through this drought, we need to come together. The district needs to do its part in improving its communications and increasing transparency. That will reduce polarization and bring us all closer to working on solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Rogers.
Hi, this is Ed Jameson. My computer went down, so I'm on my wife's thing. Hope this has never happened to anyone else. Last Friday's non-Zoom televised board retreat revealed some important things, and I'd like to briefly comment on 3 of them. First, an outstanding presentation by the Las Vegas Water District's conservation manager showed a fascinating pair of pie charts that showed before and after profiles of water use when high-use users were hit with supercharges like we'll be assessing our tier 2, 3, and 4 users effective December 1. The fellow ruefully pointed out that high-use users pay whatever it takes to get the water they need to sustain their landscaping. So our imposition of penalty pricing should not be expected to materially reduce demand by our high-use users, who will most likely just pay the higher rates to preserve their landscaping. I'm a tier 1 user, so I don't have a stake in this. I just don't want the board to be counting on significant usage reductions since Las Vegas's experience is that it's likely just not in the cards. The presentation also noted that Las Vegas ceased paying $75 rebates to people who bought new washing machines after it figured out that people buy new washers because they need them, not because they get the $75 rebate. We pay $100 rebates and should immediately cease this ineffective practice. Both of these slides were omitted from the district's posting of slides from last Friday's non-Zoom meeting, and they need to be restored on the district's website. Marin water users need to see the whole presentation, not just the parts that are supportive of our district policies. And the key slide with the 2 pie charts was not readable from the back of the room where we members of the public were sitting. And last, the meeting was cut short when several board members said they could only stay 15 minutes beyond the planned 3 p.m. end time. President Kohler cut short a presentation about possible use of 3 portable desal units to provide 5.4 million gallons of water each day, which could perhaps add 40% to our grossly insufficient likely water supply next year, while still requiring significant reductions from this year's already 23% reduction. She said additional supply was not needed and that any shortfalls could be remedied by still more so-called conservation measures, which I believe means killing much of Southern Marin's landscaping. The district, how much is that time is that?
52 seconds, sir.
Thank you. That's no problem. Thanks. The district owes its users to continue last Friday's aborted emergency desal presentation in public, where we users can see the facts. Rather than destroying the landscaping in Southern Marin, portable desal units could provide a bridge to a permanent desal solution. And if we have another year of drought, next March, we will have no alternative to temporary desal plants, but we may not be able to get them by then. The district needs to move forward with at least 3 portable desal plants and quickly. And the district owes its users to present to us publicly the omitted presentation of longer-term solutions, which realistically only can significantly and reliably rely on desal. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. We have one more.
Can I just say
Which is-
quickly, Terry,
Sure.
I know we can't engage on items that aren't agendized, but I will ask the staff. I am surprised to hear that the full presentations weren't posted. So I'm going to ask staff to make sure that that's remedied if that's the case.
Absolutely. I am sure that was a mistake, that those were added last minute, and we will take care of that ASAP first thing in the
Thanks.
morning.
One last speaker called the moderator. Go ahead, sir or ma'am.
you. This is Mimi Willard from the Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers. First of all, I would like to second pretty much everything that Roger Roberts said. I think he was completely on target, so I won't repeat those. Secondly, I want to just again express my utter dismay at the way in which the offsite retreat was conducted, including the lack of remote access, virtual access for those who did not feel it was safe to attend, which turned out to be a fair number of people. I think that that was extremely unfortunate for a topic of this import. The other thing which I think was super unfortunate, and it seems to happen at your regular board meetings as well, is that the clock gets run out, and then when you finally get around to public comment, it gets reduced down to nothing. And so people who sat through 6 hours of the retreat were allowed 1 minute each to speak, and there were very few who actually were there. So I think it was a real insult to the public and suggests that you actually really don't want to hear from the public. And that's something that seems to happen at the regular board meetings as well, that 3 minutes gets reduced to 2 minutes at the end of a very long meeting. And you know, often there's something substantive to say that people have waited to do it. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Willard. We do have one more speaker, Ms. Stephanie Hill.
Hey there, thanks. I will keep it short. Stephanie Hill, I'm a resident of Tiburon. My concern is I hear quite a lot of language in the conversation that assumes that this is a temporary situation, this idea of we need to get through the drought, and not enough consideration for the possibility, however hard that it may be to contemplate, that drought may be a new prevailing pattern, and that any scenario planning must account for this very difficult possibility that the climate in NorCal is fundamentally shifting and becoming more arid. Thanks.
There are no further speakers.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Terry. Okay, this brings us to directors and general managers announcements. Ben, did you want to start that?
Sure, President Kohler. First, a couple of quick comments. First, I wanted to note that we are aware of the concerns that were recently brought forth by the city of Richmond and some residents. And while we have had initial meetings with the city, we're planning to meet with the Richmond mayor and city staff early next week to begin to determine how to best address the construction-related concerns that have been expressed. As you know, we are facing a critical water shortage emergency, and this project is crucial to ensure our customers receive the water they need for essential indoor uses only. The water for this project is not intended for outdoor use by design and by capacity. We do plan to work closely with the City of Richmond, community members, and any and all stakeholders, including, for example, a good discussion we had today with the bike community, beginning to engage in details on bike path impacts. And we plan to take all feasible measures to minimize any and all impacts of this project. Finally, I want to emphasize that we are committed to being a good neighbor while we go through this historic and extraordinary drought cycle, not just because we know that's the only way to get this project done, a project like this in the time frame we have, but it's also who we are. And we are going to resolve these issues and work with all the stakeholders. I also wanted to briefly note in regards to the comments I was going to share anyway of last Friday's retreat, that the PowerPoint presentations, notwithstanding maybe the slight hiccup that was identified, that were provided to the board and the public attendees are all now posted on the website. And staff plans to bring to the next board meeting a summary of the meeting with all the action items that we'll talk about at the meeting, and we'll post that as well. And just a reminder that this was our once a year, one time a year annual board retreat that is important for an organization like ours to have that time to do the deeper dive and the sort of discussions that we had. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Other board directors' comments?
Could I just comment?
Announcements, I guess. Of course.
Appreciate Ben's comments. And just as far as the retreat on Friday, the cost people did video it and it's posted on their website. So, you know, I don't know whether they'd be willing to allow us to put it on our YouTube channel, but that might not be a bad idea. I mean, it looks like they captured the whole meeting. So, you know, it was a significant meeting. It was a very informative meeting, I thought. And I think getting more widespread public circulation of that meeting would actually be helpful. So, and going forward, you know, I think we should, if we do another retreat like that, we should get CMCM in there and just, you know, use our own facilities to broadcast the meeting or to videotape it. But I thought it was a very good meeting. It was very helpful, very informative. And, you know, I would encourage us to take advantage of that video if we can get a hold of it.
I'll follow up with Ms. Willard.
Thanks.
Actually, I think she wants to make a comment if that's allowed.
It's in the middle of the director's announcements.
Okay.
Larry, can I mean,
Well, I need to make an
we're
announcement.
doing director's announcements right now. Guys, it's already 8 o'clock. Okay, so
I still need to make an announcement.
announcements?
Yes, there are.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
I'm at the WEFTEC meeting in Chicago, and I'd just like to indicate there's substantial interest in DPR here. It's going on in about a half a dozen states right now that are moving forward very rapidly towards direct use of reclaimed water.
Okay. Any other director's announcements?
I just want to congratulate our staff. Obviously, a lot of work went in the retreat. And I thought it was excellent the way it came together, and it was definitely worth a day's time to do it. So I appreciate the effort gone into it.
I'll just echo that it was a really, really very informative meeting, and I think making the information as accessible as possible to the general public would be very worthwhile. There's a lot to learn there. And I think looking at making the video more broadly available might be a great way to do that. So very good work and really informative.
So I'll just add about the retreat. There was a lot of great information. I also congratulate Ben and his team on a good presentation. I'll just say for myself, I was delighted that we were able to bring in my colleague Doug Bennett from Southern Nevada Water District. I do a lot of work with them, and as one of the speakers earlier mentioned, he gave a great presentation. In addition to a couple of the issues mentioned, what's really significant about Southern Nevada, and I want to emphasize this for Marin going forward, is that they have invested their municipal bond proceeds for 2 decades now, tens of millions of dollars in their turf changeout program successfully. So that is a fantastic model for us about what it means to be investing significantly in water-wise use and avoiding water waste. Their situation with water is obviously different from ours. And as to another comment made earlier, I think we have all at this district recognized for quite some time that droughts are no longer temporary. They are in fact the new reality given climate change. And so I was really grateful for that presentation to provide us with some guidance about what it means to invest significantly in that way using capital. Okay. With that, we're going to move on to the consent calendar. And in light of a prior comment, we're going to remove item 3. So with that modification, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'd move approval. I have a question on the general manager's report, if I could.
Of course.
Which was on the item under service connections installed during September. The report indicates there was 1 new service connection in September. That's on page 7. So my question is, at a meeting or two ago, we requested that we get updated information, and I just does that represent our new hookups for the entire month of September?
Director Bragner, I could, Crystal Yasmin, Director of Engineering. Yes, that is true. 1 new service connection, but as you can also note there were 18 service upgrades, which often means either downsizing or upsizing a meter because of possible renovations at the property.
I see. So I would just, again, I think it would be really helpful for our customers to get that information out front so that we could kind of deal with some of the conversation going around in the community about expansion of our service, because according to the numbers I'm seeing, we actually have a reduction in service installations this year from last year. So again, I would just request maybe if we could get further clarification going forward on that, just to address that issue. Thanks a lot.
We'll do that.
Okay, so with that, do I have a motion for the 2 items on the consent calendar?
I'd move approval.
Second.
Do we have any further board comment on this item? Okay, Terry, do we have any public comment on this item?
Mimi Willard. Ms. Willard.
I was just going to comment on the issue of whether the video would be able to be made available, and we would be happy to speak with you about trying to expedite that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for suggesting it.
Okay, no further comments.
Okay, then we need a roll call vote, Terry.
Director Bregman.
Aye.
Director Gibson.
Aye.
Director Schmidt.
Aye.
Vice President Russell.
Aye.
And President Kohler.
Aye. That brings us to item 3, the resolution authorizing award of the contract regarding the Southern Marin pipeline replacement. We had a question about that earlier. Can we address that now?
Yes, President Kohler. This project is in between the towns of Belvedere and Tiburon. I could direct you to page 26 of the agenda packet. The pipeline alignment will cross an area that's currently a dog park. It's a Tiburon dog park. And that portion of the pipeline alignment is owned by the town of Belvedere. So we will get, there's an easement request in this item. to have a 10-foot easement to install that pipeline across the dog park. And then once you go across the dog park, that becomes the town of Tiburon. And so then there's a small easement across the Tiburon Boulevard to Lyford Drive, which is where the pipeline will terminate, the new pipeline alignment.
Okay. Do we have any board comment on this item before we go to public comment? Okay, is there public comment on this item? I just want to be sure the person who raised it has had her question answered.
Yeah, she has a comment. Go ahead, Ms. Woodring.
Thank you very much for clarifying that. I was hoping that it would be something regarding McKegney Green, the large soccer field along Tiburon Boulevard as you go from Blackie's pasture into the town of Tiburon. It's lovely. It's bright green, and I understand it's being fed with potable water. So I was hoping that you were doing something about that. Thank you for answering my question.
Thank you.
Crystal, you may just want to follow up with Ms. Woodring just on that issue. Just, I don't think we need to belabor it today though. Okay, so we now need a motion to adopt this resolution.
Move approval of the resolution.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Director Bregman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Vice President Russell,
Aye.
and President Kohler.
Aye. This brings us to our regular calendar. We're only 15 minutes behind schedule. And the drought update, which is item 4.
Good evening, Board of Directors. Lucy Croy, Water Quality Manager. I'm going to bring up my screen. Okay. So tonight we have a brief update for the drought update tonight. We're going to start off with a first water supply update, and then very excitingly, an update on the rain forecast for the next week. And then we're going to step into an update on the drought activities outreach, and Carrie Pollard, our water efficiency manager, is going to update that. So starting off first with water supply and rainfall. So this chart has been updated just through the beginning of this week, so the middle of October. Over here on the green line, our total reservoir storage as of middle of October is just above 25,000 acre feet, which is 32% of total capacity. So very historic low for this time of year, going into hopefully a much wetter winter. On average, we would typically be, for this time of year, closer to 53, 54,000 acre feet. So a little bit more on the positive side, and probably the best news I've been able to hand off in one of these water supply reports so far is the upcoming rain forecast. So over the next week, they're projecting that there's going to be 2 to 3 pretty large storms, atmospheric rivers coming through. So the first one, they're projecting about 2 to 3 inches in kind of our watershed, so over here on the left. And then the second one hitting through Sunday and Monday, another 3 to 4 inches. And then supposedly there's another storm coming after that. So good to see that there's the potential to really dampen our watershed and decrease overall fire risk out there, as well as decrease water use that we've seen out in the surface area. So for October, typically, our average, looking back through all our records, is about 2.7 inches. And just the last 20 years, it's 2.6 inches. Just to kind of frame this a little bit, each year it's varied quite a bit, being the very beginning of the wet season. So far we've received just under 0.2 inches this month. And with this rain forecasted, hopefully we'll exceed this average. So last Friday, I mentioned that DWR had put out this projection based on the USGS basin characterization model, which is that it'll take, they're saying that it'll take 140% of average rainfall to produce average runoff this year. And that's really due to the decreased efficiency of runoff due to the dry watersheds in California. And that's all through California right now. So we wanted to bring that back and frame it a little bit within our own watershed and understand what that means. So within October, that would mean, this average of 2.6 inches, that translates to 3.6. So hopefully over the next week or so, we could see actually exceeding that. And then in a water year sense, our average is 52 inches. And so 140% of rainfall would really be hitting 73 inches of rainfall. So quite a bit of rainfall. And looking over just past 20 years, we have seen a number of years hit above that. So most recently in 2019 and then 2017, those were very wet winters, as you may have remembered, and then back in 2006. So then tying those a little bit more to our projections, hitting that 140% of rainfall and how that would then lead to an average runoff as we've been projecting. So that would be this green line, the dashed green line right here. So we would need to hit the 140%, say, of rainfall in order to stay along this projection. So right now around 25,000 acre feet, and through the next year would say through March hit just above 50,000 acre feet. And looking at the savings we've been able to achieve over the past few months, I've adjusted our projections to account for a 20% conservation savings. And this is just to show a little bit more of a realistic look at where we're seeing the trends hit, and as the irrigation season closes, what we expect our average will be over the full year, the full annual conservation savings. So an update on water use, as I mentioned, last week we saw a 24% weekly reduction in water use compared to our baseline, the 3-year average. And then since May, we're seeing a cumulative conservation savings of 22%. So that's since May 1st, when the mandatory restrictions went into place and the water shortage emergency was declared. And still seeing quite a trend downwards, especially with a little bit of rainfall. Each time we see production go down, and we see our customers respond even with the restrictions we've put in. So starting to see this use decline as we go into the winter months, and hopefully hold on to just above 20%. So now I'm going to hand off to Carrie Pollard, our water efficiency manager.
Thank you, Lucy. Good evening, board. Carrie Pollard, water efficiency manager of the Drought activities and outreach. Next slide. So we've had one webinar so far as part of our community conversations on drought. The first session was specifically tailored around water supply update and conservation programs, resources, etc. That happened on the 11th. We had about 80 attendees. It was very successful. There was a good feedback and good conversations with the public. And we look forward to the second seminar, which is on Thursday, the 21st from 5 to 7. We'll do a water supply update once again, and then also kind of take a deeper dive into drought response and supplemental water supply projects. The format is a brief presentation from staff, and then we have an open time for Q&A from the public. And so additional information to sign up for this. Part 2 of the drought webinar is on our website, and folks can get more information there. Next slide. Leveraging kind of our trusted messenger campaign that our comms team has put together, we heard from a local bicycle coalition who wanted to put on a Tour de Drought. And so there's a number of routes, 3 different routes throughout the watershed. They're either mountain bikes, road, but really you could separate those segments up and open it up to anyone throughout the watershed who may want to participate. They can register and get a free Marin water bottle. And these are self-guided and tracked, and then reported through Strava. So it runs for about a month. We were thrilled that actually Pond Farm Brewing is actually brewing a Tour de Drought beer for the occasion, and we feel that this is a really great way to kind of continue to push the messaging in ways that folks may not hear about from us, but they may follow Pond Farm or some of the other restaurants and bicycle coalitions who are partnered in putting this on. So we were thrilled about it and look forward to seeing the successful outcome of it. Next slide. Mulch Madness. So this is our direct install sheet mulching program where we worked with the Conservation Corps of for the North Bay to do a direct installation program. It just wrapped up last week on the 14th. We had 48 total sites that went through the program, totaling just over 46,000 square feet. In addition to of sheet mulching, we also ensured that they received some additional on-site training through the Qualified Water Efficient Landscaper Training Program, so that they have additional job skills from participating in the CCNB program. The original contract was for just under $100,000, which equated to $4.16 a square foot. And then we did an amendment to extend the program, which was about $70,000, and it dropped the total cost down to $315,000. And we look forward to continuing to see these efficiencies as the program, we continue to potentially roll it out next spring if the drought does continue, which highly likely that it will. And that will be coming back to the board. And so we just wanted to wrap up with the success of this program. We got a lot of good feedback from our customers who participated, who really appreciated having someone come out and do this initial work around sheet mulching their sites. Next slide. There's a webinar actually just this evening from 5:30 to 6:30 on supporting tree health. There was a tree care during times of drought webinar that was offered through Daily Acts and the city of Petaluma, who partnered with us. We had over 100 attendees, and this information was recorded and available on Daily Acts website. We can also link to it from our website to just provide additional resources for our customers looking at strategies for maintaining tree health as we proceed through these drought conditions. Next slide. And recognizing the rains arrived, there's been some social media posts talking about turning irrigation off. We're in these shoulder months where it's cooling down and we're getting a little bit of precipitation. And so it's a good time to remind everyone that they can turn off their irrigation controllers, and that there's no supplemental irrigation that's needed at these times. And we're continuing to push out this new messaging in light of the recent rain, and we'll look forward to seeing that continue as it continues to rain, as Lucy mentioned, the projections show.
Okay, Carrie, I have a question related to that, actually. With regard to our recycle stations, Civic Center and so forth, I got a couple of people who are very excited about that, and twice a week regulars out there. And they were told that if it starts raining, they're going to shut that down. And I said, well, I would find out. And they were also asking me, why would you do that? And, so I don't know. Can you respond to those questions?
I'll let Lucy respond to
that. Director Gibson, it's a good question. So how we're approaching it first is probably just to decrease the number of days. We saw even on just this Monday, about half the number of people come out because it was wet. So we're going to first approach it as rain hits to just decrease the number of days and kind of take it week by week and see what the response is.
And this is not like a beginning of a phase out necessarily, I assume. I mean, if the rain stopped, they'll be back open again.
We're going to continue to evaluate,
okay.
as we move forward. But I think if the rain stops, then we will stay open.
Okay.
Yeah.
Seems to be very successful with the people certainly that are using it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Very good. Next slide, Lucy. All right, and next steps. So we are working on development of a strategic implementation plan for long-term conservation and communications. As we've noted prior presentation, we continue to refine and enhance our drought outreach, and of course, the monitoring and reporting back to the board on the status of program goals and new happenings within demand reduction programs. With that, we'd be happy to take any questions you all may have.
Thanks so much, Carrie. That was a great presentation, and thanks to Lucy as well. I just want to very quickly say a big thanks to the Marin bike folks. I just love the Tour de Drought. That's fantastic. And not to single that out, but it does look like we're making good progress in engaging the community, and it's just fantastic to have these great partners. I just want to also note this is listed as an approval item. I believe that's a mistake. This is an information only item. So there is no approval here, just for the board and the public's clarification. And so with that, I want to go to board comment.
I love the tour to Drought too. I think that it looks like a lot of fun. So did anybody from Corte Madera get a hold of staff about getting some of that recycled water to their parks? No? Okay, I'll reach out to them again. There was an article in the IJ about them losing some trees. So Fairfax is using it very successfully. So, you know, it's a real godsend to keep the parks going. So
yeah, Director Bragman, when we heard about that, we did try to reach out to the town, but I don't think we've been successful.
Okay, well, we tried.
It seems to me that we should keep the recycled water station open as long as there's demand, whether it rains or it doesn't rain. I don't think the rain is really the relevant decision in that issue. It's the demand.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other board comments before I go to public comments on this item? Okay, Terry, do we have public comment on this item?
Yes, one, Patty Stoliar.
Yes, I live in Corte Madera, and we asked the town staff if they are using recycled water, and they said they are. And when I wondered about the trees being lost, I wondered if they were using it for the grass. So I don't know what the deal is, but they said they were using recycled water. So yeah, if you could do more outreach, that would be great.
I'll
Thanks.
follow up too. Thanks.
There are no further comments.
Okay, then I'm going to thank staff again for a great presentation. We're going to move on to item 5, which is a resolution regarding the emergency intertie project. And I'm just going to ask Ben if he can clarify. I think this is, again, a little misleading as a title. It says resolution approving the intertie project and authorizing the manager to execute an agreement. My understanding is that we are not tonight approving the project. We are taking some interim steps that would nevertheless preserve our the board's ability to go in another direction. So my understanding that this is not the go decision. Can you clarify that? It may just be an unfortunate point.
I'll start and I'll let Molly clean up after me. That I think a way to think about it is there's a distinction of approving the project in context of the CEQA action we're taking and committing to the project. So we are not committing tonight to do the project. The approval is part of the CEQA. Molly, do you want to fill in any gaps?
Sure, I can attempt to do that, President Kohler and members of the board. For CEQA purposes, it's essential that we to make sure that we're identifying how we're complying with CEQA when we take significant steps that would move in the direction of being committed to a project. Now, while it doesn't legally bind us to continue with the project, and it doesn't preclude us from making changes to the project as we move forward through the process. But from a legal standpoint, we want to make sure that we're being consistent with CEQA. So we're asking the board to make an official statement for purposes of being able to file a notice of exemption so that we can let people know how we are complying with CEQA. It is a significant step that we're asking the board to take, but I don't see it as one that is irreversible if that's something the board wants to do in the future.
I think from a transparency perspective, it's important. It has been described to the board several times that tonight we are not making the go decision an irrevocable decision. Okay.
Right.
All right. With that, let's move forward to that presentation.
Yes, good evening, board members, members of the public. Paul Sellier, Operations Director. And if I can get that to work, there we go. Emergency intertie project tonight. Good evening. So we're going to just quickly touch on the project background and just remind us why we're all why we're here, why we're considering this project. and we'll sort of very briefly review what our short-term options are in terms of water supply for the drought, a brief update on the intertie project, sort of a roadmap, if you like, and then we'll get into the pre-purchase of materials discussion, and then a summary of what the recommendations are this evening, followed by our next steps. So we've seen this chart a number of times now, and it reflects our water supply projections. And just to remind ourselves that our projections, were we to have a similar winter to the ones that we've just experienced, one of these lower projection lines, which are reservoir storage levels, could certainly occur. And you can see if 25% rainfall was to occur again, this orange dashed line would take us down into the uncertainty zone of water supply in our local reservoir systems. So until we know we're not going to be in that situation, we're planning for the scenario where we will need a supplemental water supply next year, in the second half of next year. There are no ideal options for us in terms of water supply. And of course, we continue demand management. And I think we've heard both from the expert from Southern Nevada Water Agency on Friday, what an incredible job the water efficiency staff has done in the short period of time, and the commitment that the district has to demand management in the long term. Winter water is this concept developed by Sonoma, where excess flow in the Russian River may be made available. It does require, of course, adequate precipitation, which we heard from Lucy. Maybe we'll be getting hints of that this next few days. There is a regulatory approval process that we need to go through, and of course, collaboration with other contractors who are also interested in this water supply. Regardless, we do plan to pursue this, and we know the infrastructure already exists to deliver this water. So we're really very, very excited about this opportunity. Desalination, we have talked about as a temporary facility, understanding that it's limited in capacity. And when we talk about capacity, we mean nominal capacity. Operational capacity may in fact be less than nominal capacity, just due to the complexity of operating that type of a facility. The complex permitting make it very challenging to fulfill. And of course, it's going to require a significant near-term commitment to reserve the equipment. The emergency intertie project, the infrastructure component, is progressing well, and there is still a lot of work to be done on water transfers and wheeling. And we have heard earlier this evening from the general manager that we're going to be committed to addressing any construction impacts for this project, should the board decide to proceed. In terms of desalination, I do want to just spend a moment on that. We had a discussion on Friday, and there's interest to look closer at winter water. And Sonoma, you can see in the chart on the right, has provided a very detailed analysis over a long period of time that does indicate that there may be some water available depending on the type of year that we have. It could be anywhere from a couple thousand acre feet to 6,000 acre feet. Of course, if it's very dry, that may be less than even the 2. But for now, it does seem to be extremely promising. And in comparison to desalination, which is of high cost and complexity, and again, remembering these are temporary facilities and an insufficient volume of water, we are, I think, determining that this is really not a feasible approach for the current drought, where winter water does seem promising. So winter water then in conjunction with the intertie, because remember, with winter water, the facilities already exist to deliver it. So in conjunction with the intertie, it can provide an additional supply in lieu of pursuing temporary desalination. Our roadmap then for the emergency intertie project, tonight is a significant night where we're asking the board to approve the project to allow staff to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act by filing a notice of exemption. We're also asking that the board approve the agreement with Contra Costa Water District, which includes terms for conveyance, storage, and the transfer of water. And of course, the pre-purchase of certain long lead items. And we'll get into the three of those in a little more detail next. Following on from those, as we continue down the roadmap in November, we'll be bringing a water purchase authorization request. And in December, the wheeling agreement with East Bay Mud, which will contain the costs and conditions for East Bay Mud to move water to us. And then in January of 2022, we are expecting an award for construction for pipeline work, should the board again decide to pursue the project. So then with respect to the California Environmental Quality Act compliance, or CEQA, the staff and consultants have prepared a notice of exemption based on the finding that the Intertie project is statutorily exempt from further CEQA review and analysis, largely because that analysis simply couldn't be conducted within the time necessary for us to deliver water for the project. The project approval will allow staff to file the notice of exemption and help us make the necessary findings required by CEQA. And so this in turn is a necessary step to advance the project, to preserve it as an option for water supply for next year, but it does not legally obligate the board to proceed should circumstances change.
Can I just clarify that, Paul? It
Yes.
doesn't legally obligate us to proceed under any circumstances.
Correct.
Okay.
And then regarding some of the comments that we've seen and published regarding Richmond in particular, I'd like to assure the board and the city of Richmond that we are committed, as we've heard from Ben, our general manager earlier, to really hearing and understanding their concerns and to make refinements to the project as necessary to address those concerns. So tonight's proposed actions, the project approval and the NOE in no way limit or preclude our ability to undertake those discussions and refinements and even revisions. Our project timeline is very tight and we're moving very quickly. And we do need to take certain steps to preserve this as a water supply option. So as additional details come to light, we do have the ability to again revise the project description and file another notice of exemption if necessary. So I just wanted to reiterate our commitment to working with all the stakeholders and in particular the city of Richmond this evening.
And if I may, I just want to emphasize, because I'm hearing President Kohler, your concern about the steps that we're asking the board to take tonight. And there are some who would perceive this as a serious commitment, of course, with the actions that we're putting forward. And in order to assure those folks who would be concerned that this is a commitment that may not be undone, we wanted to make sure that we were complying with CEQA at this time, preparing the analysis and prepared to file the documentation for that purpose. So it doesn't mean that we're locked in, but it does provide that legal protection with respect to the California Environmental Quality Act, and explains to the public what reliance we're making in taking these large steps.
Thanks, Molly. So then moving to the cooperative agreement with Contra Costa Water District, and for those that were able to attend Friday, was an excellent presentation by Marguerite Patil of the Contra Costa Water District. The key elements of the agreement, of course, govern the facilities to convey and transfer the water, as well as to store the water within Los Vaqueros, and how the districts are going to work cooperatively through the regulatory approvals process. There's elements of operational coordination, as well as a detailed description regarding the cost and conveyance, cost for conveyance and storage of the water. The agreement also contemplates an inability to complete the transfer of the water should the board decide, for example, not to pursue the pipeline after we've already purchased water. So to reiterate, it's a fairly straightforward agreement on the face of it. And it's not a commitment to purchase water at this stage. It's really a cooperative agreement describing how we're going to be working with Contra Costa Water District over these water transfers. So then moving to the pre-purchase of materials, the quotations have come in for the materials with pipe at about $17.5 million, which includes a 5% contingency. And I've requested the contingency because we are moving very quickly, and it is possible that we refine our project description and alignments to accommodate any construction issues that may arise. And so the 5% contingency will allow us to purchase additional materials should it be necessary. The pump station quote came in at $3.7 million. And the bolted steel tanks were just a hair under $2 million. The total then for the materials tonight is $23.2 million. And we have discussed previously with the board that staff has looked at the potential for risk mitigation of these purchases. And we've analyzed our distribution and transmission system, looking for pipe that we'd be able to replace with if we were sort of stuck with a quantity of this pipe. And in the inset diagram here shows the Southern Marin line, which runs from Bontempi treatment plant to Southern Marin, which is close to 20,000 feet. And then there's another section, a couple sections of line that are about 7,700 feet that we could reuse this material for. The schedule of manufacturing for these, the pipe does indicate that the pipe, nothing will be fabricated. That's our understanding at this point, that fabrication begins in February. So until that point in time, it would appear that we've really purchased materials for the fabrication of pipe. And so materials hopefully are a lesser value than the finished product. The purchase specification that we've used includes language for the manufacturer to assist the district in reselling the pipe or any of the raw materials. The pump stations, we likely would not have gone out on a bid just independent of this project to purchase these pump stations. But if we are left sort of with these and the board doesn't pursue the project, these would serve a role for us in emergency response. And then similarly, the tanks could be deployed or retained for emergency response. And it is possible also that we would be able to work with these manufacturers to understand what our sort of sunk costs were and just sort of have that discussion as to whether these could be sold and how much could be recovered and that sort of a thing. So the next slide just sort of contemplates an example scenario to sort of think through and help us crystallize a little bit what that might look like. So if it's early January and we've just been happily deluged all winter so far, and the reservoirs are filled and spilled, and the board decides the project's no longer necessary, what would we do with these materials? So again, we've talked through a little bit, but the pumps, again, we'd work with the manufacturer, understand where we were with respect to the sunk costs, and then make an evaluation as to whether we would complete that fabrication and then retain them or try to sell them, and similarly with tanks. And then, as I mentioned, with the pipeline, again, indications are that nothing is fabricated until February. And so we're really talking about materials, and the pipe fabricator has indicated they're willing to assist us in selling those and using those materials. And of course, if we're not constraining their schedule of manufacturing, this is just our understanding of it. If for some reason they started manufacturing earlier and we were sort of left with some quantity of pipe, we're confident that we can use up to 50% of it. So then a summary of the recommendations that we're asking tonight is for the board to approve a resolution to approve the emergency intertie project which again allows us to file the notice of exemption. And to approve the agreement with Contra Costa Water District and authorize the general manager to finalize and execute that agreement. And to approve the pre-purchase of certain materials for the project and authorize the general manager to finalize and execute those supply agreements for piping, tanks, and pump stations, not to exceed a total of $23,242,064.78. And this total includes a contingency of $836,233 for pipe. So this is the last slide tonight. We of course are going to continue our demand management. We're going to pursue outreach to the project stakeholders and agencies, and we know we need to improve that. And so we're committing to working with affected parties to understand and address construction impacts. Of course, we'll be back to the board at almost every board meeting discussing the project and bringing updates. And I'd just like to leave this maybe nugget, if you like. We're planning to develop some materials to support our discussion of, you know, what the questions we all get of what happens if it really rains a lot this winter? What does that mean? And how do we get our minds around that decision? So we'll hopefully be bringing that kind of discussion to a board or doc meeting, or operations committee, meeting in the near future. So that concludes my presentation and request for the board this evening.
Thanks, Paul. Thorough as always. I imagine that this is an item that is going to generate a lot of conversation. So for everybody who's joined us tonight for this, the way we're going to proceed, I'm going to first ask for board discussion, and then we're going to go to public comment, and then I will bring it back to the board. So board comments on this item.
I have one.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Larry. Okay. Go ahead.
You go.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying the part about the contingency. I found that a little confusing, Paul, whether that was a contingency in the bid price or a contingency just in general. So that is strictly our contingency, huh? Not their contingency.
That's correct, Director Russell.
Thanks.
That, I think, was my question, which was, so is the purchase, do we purchase the raw materials and then pay for fabrication?
No, the bid is for pipe, and we're trying to understand what that process is and bring that information to you so you have that insight. Essentially, our understanding is that the first stick of pipe is not fabricated until February 1st.
Right.
And we'll be following that up with the pipe fabricator, just to understand exactly what their schedule is and when the materials are going to get there. And it's challenging for them to do that now because the order hasn't been placed. So they sort of have vague ideas of what the manufacturing schedule looks like.
Okay, my question is the purchase agreement phased so that we would pay for materials and then make a separate payment for fabrication?
No.
Okay. So
It's
a unified purchase. Okay.
It's a unified purchase that basically requires, if we were to cancel the order, that we pay for their out of pocket.
Okay.
Right, so if I can add, we included some special provisions in the contract that are kind of tied to where they are in the purchase of materials and the fabrication process, so that if we were early in the process, for example, and there was a purchase of materials, that we had some ability to work with them to use those materials for other purposes. This is our sort of mitigation that we tried to build into the contract, just as a having an out in lieu of, say, a restocking fee, for example. So that's why the process of process and timing of materials and fabrication is important to understand, because those are sort of some of the off ramps that might be available to the
Right.
district.
Is that going to come back to the board for approval?
That's already in the agreement
The
that you're
purchase,
approving tonight.
the purchase agreement is there?
Yes. Well, the authorization for us to finalize and proceed with those.
But, okay, not the actual purchase agreement itself.
It's
No.
not in the packet. No.
Right.
Okay, I have a question. Obviously, a lot of work and planning has gone into this to get us to this point. And I understand there's off ramps we can take along the way. But assuming a go forward item without taking any of the off ramps, what's the timetable? When would we have boots on the ground actually doing the construction? And when would we be ready to intake water?
Yeah, that's a big question. So the construction start in certain segments is going to depend on the permitting. And one of the permits that we're working on is the BCDC permit. So once we have, and we think we should be okay, right, as we work through these permits. So assuming the permit goes to plan, we should be able to have folks working on the bridge in January. Now, that won't be pipe installation, but there are certain preparations that we need to make in order to install the pipe in the fastest possible manner when it does arrive. So the first stick of pipe at the moment doesn't show up on the job site until March 9th. So from January and February, we're essentially making preparations. And some of those preparations include, for example, Caltrans has requested that we replace certain rivets at 16 locations with high strength bolts. Then of course we know the pipe route is hanging from underneath the upper deck. So pipe hangers need to be installed. And there may be the occasional sign and what they call travelers, which are the old system by which they used to run trolley to hang scaffolding off the underneath of the bridge. Some of those will be removed. So there's some preparation work that we need to do on the pipe route. And then of course, the project, we talk about it as a singular one, but in reality, there'll be several different work zones. Pelican Way, for example, is the site of 2 tanks and a portable pump station. And to support that infrastructure, we need foundations for the tanks, because these are 2 1 million gallon tanks. We also need, some pipeline, yard piping in that yard. We're going to need electrical equipment installed by PG&E, transformer, and so on for the pump station. So that's one area, another area of work. And then similarly, in other piping on Francisco and across Pelham, that work could start as soon as the pipe is available. So there may be different areas of work at different times, and we haven't quite refined the exact start time. For example, it may be possible, and at the board's pleasure, of course, that we may be in a position to start the foundation work for the tanks in December.
Mm-hmm.
But more on that detailed construction schedule to come.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question directly?
Well, yeah, and then turn on the faucet.
Turn on the faucet. We're still holding fast to July 1st. That's our target date.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you.
So I have a couple of thoughts that I want to offer at this point. I think this project raises a lot of complicated issues, and maybe to sort of step back and talk a little bit at a 30,000 foot level. What this project does is would really be, it's really not a drought project at all. I mean, we're pursuing it quickly because we have an immediate drought situation, but this, unlike during that period in the 70s that we've all heard so much about, this would be a permanent piece of infrastructure that would really for the first time connect Marin to California's much larger water infrastructure ecosystem. Again, that's a complicated thing. Different people are going to feel differently about that. What that does for us in a time of climate change is create a great deal more flexibility and resilience in light of what we project without knowing for certain is coming. And as a speaker earlier today said, really acknowledges the reality of the new precipitation situation that we're in. So there's that. At the same time, I'm not at all comfortable with the idea that we're not going to be more sustainable as a community, that this is being seen by some people as, well, we'll just do this and then it'll be business as usual. We'll continue at 124 GPCD. To me, I can really only justify this kind of investment and the resilience and the flexibility that comes with this if we are very clear that this is for health and safety purposes. So we're not doing that tonight, but I think it is important that we as a board discuss this and that we discuss it with the public. And what is this for? And at least for me right now, that would be an important marker that this is not something we're going to turn to as a regular, as our first source of supply. What appeals to me about this, unlike a permanent, and here I'm distinguishing between permanent desal and the emergency desal that Paul discussed, is that permanent desal would really flip our business model. We'd wind up having to, and I'm oversimplifying here, I can feel you all cringing, but essentially a permanent desal facility would flip our business model where we would be using our most expensive water first, because you really have to run desal all the time. It would permanently increase our operating costs and require that we use that more expensive source of supply before our other sources. So part of what it's appealing about a bridge pipeline is that we really can turn it off. It really is a switch. It really is something that we can turn to on an as needed basis for health and safety purposes. So I think one thing that we need to think through as a board, and I think we need to hear about this from the management and staff, is how are we going to do that? How are we going to ensure that we have the legal and operational guardrails so that a piece of infrastructure like this is used appropriately? That we are protecting the environment of the Central Valley, in the Delta, that we are ensuring we are, taking, wet water that would otherwise have been used for a different consumptive use, and that we are making a commitment to local demand reduction so that we are not using this water for essentially wasteful purposes. So anyway, I think all of that needs to be hashed out in a meaningful way before we make permanent long-term commitments. I'm willing to go along with the studies and the work we need to do to be positioned, but I think we need to be clear-eyed and transparent about what this means for us and how and when we're going to use this piece of infrastructure for supplemental supply.
I'll just add, those are very good comments, Director Kohler. I think this is a very complicated project, and I think it needs to be understood that we're doing this project because this drought has shown us that we are vulnerable. Our district, our customers, we are vulnerable to multiple years of extreme dry conditions, the kind of conditions that we know are going to become more the norm. And while we're continuing to advance conservation measures and to reduce demand in our district, to improve wise use of water, we can't guarantee that we're going to have sufficient water this next year if we have a similar dry year like we have. And so we have to move forward with this project in order to ensure water supply for our communities. There also are the long-term benefits of water supply reliability of this project because it is a permanent project. But I have a number of concerns about this project, and Director Kohler, you touched on one of them, and General Manager Hornstein, you stated at the start of this, which is this project is only for essential water use. And so I really want to see some specific water supply and dry year conditions be defined as to when this project will be used in the future to make sure that it does not undermine our conservation and wise use of water. Secondly, I also want to make sure that we are not having environmental impacts associated with where the water comes from. There are a lot of the water sources in the Central Valley are over allocated. There is mismanagement of water that is depleting water from streams, impacting fish and wildlife. And the Bay Delta has exports that are causing a collapse, are contributing to a collapse for certain of the Bay Delta. And I need to make sure that our future source of water is not contributing to those environmental problems. The third part of this project that I'm concerned about is that in the project, it calls for the use of diesel generators at the Richmond pump station. And I'm concerned about the air quality and environmental and climate impacts of using a diesel generator for normal use. It seems to me that's unnecessary and it needs to be avoided. So part of my continued support for this project is contingent on a commitment that the power for the pump station come from the grid and not from diesel generators.
President Kohler, if I could comment on the diesel generators, Director Schmidt, those are in the project description in the NOE only as emergency backup. We have already applied for line power for PG&E, and that's always been our intention to use line power for both the Richmond site and our Pelican Way site. And yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful. I think that wasn't entirely clear in the board information. So I think that might be important news for some of the folks who've joined us this evening.
I agree, and I wonder if I could just finish. I agree with Director Schmidt, and I wonder, Paul, how important is it for that to be included? I'd be interested in seeing if that can be stricken, because it does seem like kind of a belt and suspenders approach. I understand why it's there, but I think it's it's concerning, it's stressful for local residents, and I think it would be a show of good faith if it's something that we can alter.
We will proceed and take a look at that, and we'll brief the board on our assessment of what I'm hearing. You ask is, do we need it as a belt and suspender? So give us just a bit of time to confer with PG&E and develop confidence in that schedule and be able to come back to you on that.
Well, I think what's confusing or concerning to Monty and myself is if we go forward tonight, are we effectively approving that? And you're going to just come, yeah, that's my concern.
Right. So what I would say to that, there's really at this point, no element of the project nor the project in its entirety that we're committing to tonight. So we are able to, as we heard from the General Counsel, refine our approach as we address the issues that we're hearing from Richmond and other stakeholders, and modify the project description and do an associated updated NOE to address these refinements going forward.
And if I can just add, I think it's really important to note that, we are moving very quickly with this project under the circumstances, and what's being put forward in the project description and that's been presented tonight is the best information about the project that we have. But I think it's in details, and we can come back with additional details and plan to do so. Hopefully that my internet's unstable, so I'm turning my camera off. So I want to stress that we still have that option going forward, but we do need to have a project description to take the actions that we're taking tonight. We do need to have identified what is it we're doing to the best of our ability based on what we know right in this moment.
I think we all understand that. I think this is a room full, certainly this is a board that understands CEQA well. I'm just not confident that having the piece about the diesel generators is a necessary thing to take the legal steps you want to in moving forward with the CEQA compliance. And I just, I'm concerned about keeping it in there at this point, since it's not clear to me that it's required. But at the same time, I'm hearing what sounds like a very strong commitment from you and the general manager that you're going to look at this and bring it back. But my preference would be to simply eliminate it tonight. I'm not really seeing the legal reason to keep a detail like that in the project description.
Well, I think what the project description contains, it was the best information we had when we did the project description, and there is still, I think, some work to be done, as General Manager Hornstein indicated, to get the assurances from PG&E. So based on what we know currently, that's what we put in the project description. That doesn't mean that we aren't going to work diligently to get the assurances that we need to make that shift. But I think to assume that that can happen will commit us to a particular path forward when we don't maybe have quite the information necessary to do so.
If I could just very briefly, as Paul mentioned, currently we have shifted of an early approach of just using diesel generators that may still perhaps be out there a little bit, to now looking at the diesel generators as a backup. And now we will pursue shifting with no diesel generator. The current approach as a backup is really for two scenarios. One is just normal power outages, and technically we're comfortable that with the PG&E feed, we do not need a backup. This is not a long-term facility, and we'd be fine having short outages if that were to occur of PG&E power. The other backup we're looking at is, were we to find that the PG&E connection, for whatever reason, would take us into the critical path and delay the project, and by how much. I do not anticipate that to be realized, but I do want to just take a few days of due diligence and work with PG&E and come back to the board with the relative risk of doing away with the backup diesel generators to address the concerns. And I do appreciate what we're hearing, and we will pursue that path aggressively.
Okay.
I think it's also important to note that it's at least 2 to 3 times more expensive to use the generators than it is to buy power from PG&E, maybe more than that. So we have a big incentive not to run them, even if they were there.
We should also be looking at Marin Energy. Richmond was one of the founders, or one of the early members of MEA. And I think actually Mayor Butt was chairman of Marin Energy for a time when I was on that board. So I think it would also be a good idea as far as the power source. We should be looking at expanding our Marin Energy and commitment to clean energy to power those pumps. But I also just want to say, I really want to agree with President Kohler and Monty's comments about the long-term effect of the project. We're tapping into a very stressed Bay Delta system, and this really is a relief valve, is the way I'm looking at it, and I do think we have to tread very carefully. I was very reassured by Marguerite Pilar's
Patel.
Patel. Which is one reason why I wanted that video to get wider circulation. I thought her spirit of collaboration and cooperation, I found very reassuring. And I think long-term, it's probably important for Marin Water to have a seat at that table, even if we're just a small player in it, because it's going to open up other opportunities for our district to be more resilient. But I do agree with Monty and President Kohler's comments about caution. How we approach it and how we govern it is critical.
Thank you for that, Larry. I really
just wanna
appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you too. This has been a very rich discussion on some really key points though, but I want to make sure that we do, before we make further commitments that to implement this project, that we really do the work to figure out and define the conditions under which we are going to use this project, as we talked about, as well as guidelines around the sources of water, so that we're clear that we can explain this to our customers, that we are doing this wisely, we're doing this for the right reasons, and that we will not be having environmental impacts.
Agreed. And I know we need to get to public comments, so I just want to make one last set of points. And that is that even though we're pursuing this particular path with CEQA, I want to, I just want to put out here as another marker that I think it's important that we as a district commit to working with our neighbors and our friends in Richmond to not simply mitigate adverse impacts, but to really leave the community positively, do what we can to be having a beneficial impact, really leave the area even better, by investing in improvements locally. So, I don't know what that looks like exactly. There are some ideas that are being, developed, but I am, for me, it will be very important that we make that affirmative commitment, that we do not simply do the floor, but we really go well beyond that to making this a beneficial thing and a good thing for our neighbors across the bay. So if there's no further board comments, I want to go to public comment on this item.
We have 8 public comments right now and growing. So we'll start off with the first 3, Lisa Johnson, then Jeff Ritterman and Bruce Bayert, in that order, please. Miss Lisa Johnson.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, great, thank you. Dear board members, I'm writing tonight in opposition to the intertype project currently as proposed. People in Richmond wish that Marin County residents and their representatives would really have some self-reflection right now on how it's coming off to Richmond residents with projects being proposed from your side. In the past, you just expanded your 3 lanes on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. The eastbound direction did not get, you got that, westbound direction didn't. We are now plagued with chronic traffic congestion whenever there's an issue on the bridge. We're sitting in more increased pollution from the cars. And now you guys are proposing this project. And the current mechanism by where you are proposing it is going to adversely impact the lives of Richmond residents, particularly those of us living in Point Richmond. I oppose the project location of the pumping station as has been proposed. The pump station should not be placed in the residential and commercial district vicinity of Castro and Tewksbury. It and the associated generator set and the piping should be installed in the industrial area on the other side of I-580, with the pipeline running along or under Chevron Way between Castro and Marine Streets on Caltrans and or City of Richmond property. The pipeline could be attached to the soffit of the Schofield Avenue freeway bridge structure and westbound outboard to the Bay Trail rather than buried in it. This would eliminate most of the adverse construction and operational impacts on Richmond residents and businesses while maintaining bicycle and pedestrian access to Point Melati and the Point San Pablo Harbor. This process is being imposed on us without really adequate CEQA protection. We want our voices to be heard and we want our quality of lives to matter. Please stop treating us like second-class citizens to you guys. It's not right. We want you to have water, but you need to respect us too. We care and we matter just as much as you. So all we're asking is more stringent conservation measures on your part and an equal seat at the table as a stakeholder, because our lives and our health and safety matter just as much. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ritterman, please.
Yes, so you want to make it better? So you're putting it in my neighborhood. You're putting it in Point Richmond, the pumping station. You want a pumping station in your neighborhood? No, you don't. So why are you putting it in my neighborhood? Put it in the industrial area, as it was just mentioned. You're also going to ruin the bike lanes. You're going to ruin the bike lanes. You're going to ruin the trail, the San Francisco Bay Trail, that so many people in Point Richmond have worked on for years to make it a reality. Where did your thinking come from on that? I look at your budget. Where is the money for Richmond? Where is the money for mitigation? How come we're not getting money out of the deal? How come there's no insurance policy in case something goes wrong? That you'll have the money to pay if something goes wrong and we get a deluge from your water. We should be a partner in this. We should be getting paid on a yearly basis. You can't just come in here, use our city property, take the water and put it across our city. And what do we get? We get the construction, we get the pollution, we get the traffic. And what are you saying? We're going to make it better? How are you going to make it better? We should be getting paid for all of that inconvenience. That should be in your budget. You didn't think about that? You didn't think that Richmond is being inconvenienced and that you're paying millions and millions and millions of dollars for a pipe, and you didn't think that the city of Richmond should be getting any compensation for this? Come on, where's your head at? I'm done.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bruce Bayard, please.
Yes, my name is Bruce Byron. I'm the chair of TRAC, the Trails for Richmond Action Committee. President Kohler, members of the board, I appreciate the chance to speak with you. I urge you not to tear up the 1.1 miles of Bay Trail between Castro Street and the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge to bury a pipeline in it. This is critical infrastructure. It's the only way the people of Richmond and the rest of the East Bay can bicycle or walk to the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge Trail. It's the only way to go to and from the city of Richmond's Point Melati Beach Park. It's the only way to bicycle and walk to the Point San Pablo Harbor with its famous Black Star Pirate Barbecue. There are alternatives to putting the pipeline in the Bay Trail and shutting it down. One was described earlier. Put the pipeline on the other side of I-580 from the residential and commercial area in the industrial area and run it up Chevron Way on Caltrans and city property. A more attractive one would be to simply hook into the East Bay Mud 12-inch main right at the Stenmark Drive exit from I-580, right next to the bridge entry. It's right there, 12-inch main. Why not put it in there? It's just crazy to shut down the Bay Trail, whether it's for 6 months, 3 months, 1 month, or 1 week. Also, it's sort of crazy to put 3 or 4 skid-mounted above ground pumps in a residential and commercial area. That'll be enough noise, not to mention the generators. When the generators are running, if they're installed during emergencies, they're loud, they stink, they emit air pollutants. So please consider and pursue alternatives to putting the pipeline in over a mile of Bay Trail and shutting that down during construction. We all know that whenever you cut into a road or a trail to install underground equipment, the surface of the trail is never the same again. So, but hopefully rain is coming now. You'll get your 140% of normal. This discussion will all be moot. But if not, please look at alternative routes that don't destroy the Bay Trail. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Former Mayor Frank Egger, please.
Thank you. Frank Egger of Fairfax, speaking for the North Coast Rivers Alliance, opposing the Marin Municipal Water District's approval of an exemption from CEQA for the intertie on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge that will transfer water from the Central Valley to Marin and connect Marin to the State Water Project. The staff report says MMWD is buying surplus water from Central Valley Ag Water Districts on the open market. There has been no discussion as to the impacts of water transfer on the Sacramento-San Joaquin Bay Delta and the Delta smelt and Chinook salmon. Delta smelt may well be about to go extinct, and spring and winter run Chinook salmon are not that far behind. The public needs to know what the impacts are on the fisheries of both the Sacramento-San Joaquin Bay Delta and the Russian Eel River complex, as the intertie will allow a future MMWD board, even on a 3-2 vote, to approve selling surplus Marin water to East Bay Mud and beyond to the California Water Project. I have continually stated that since the BARR calls for an intertie on the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, that means water can move in either direction. Marin gets 25% of its water, and North Marin gets 75% of its water from Sonoma water, which is water from the Russian Eel River complex. California water barons have been trying to get their hands on Eel River water since the 1950s. If this intertie is built without an EIR, one day when MMWD has surplus water, they will sell water eventually to Southern California via the intertie. That's the Russian Eel River complex water going south. An environmental impact report will determine whether or not construction of the 1,400 housing units and commercial development at Point Malati can be served with water coming from the intertie. He said, she said staff comments are insufficient to determine where the water from the intertie will come or go from in either direction on an intertie issues, including fisheries. Staff promises are just that, staff promises, not legally binding. MMWD's project, whether it's for 15,000 acre feet or 100,000 acre feet, is a permanent intertie and therefore not exempt from CEQA. The North Coast Rivers Alliance states an environmental impact report is absolutely necessary before the board authorizes expenditures of the $23 million you have on tonight's agenda to be spent on pipe, contracts for water, and purchase or leasing of rights of way. This project ties Marin into the California Water Project and is not exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. And EIR is absolutely necessary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay, the next speakers are Claudia Barron-Hamill, then Ed Jamison, please, in that order.
Hi, my name is Claudia Citroen. I'm a Richmond resident, and I'd like to make 4 points. The first point is you base your study on Las Vegas. I watched a documentary on Las Vegas. I think you're aware that Las Vegas in January will be cut off from Lake Mead and they will not receive their water from Las Vegas. So you're basing it on an idea that is non-existent under the current drought conditions. Second, it is obvious to me that Mr. Hornstein has turned this into a personal crusade to push this project through. I watched public comments on the news with Ms. Detweiler, where we are opposing it in Richmond because you, Marin resident, failed 3 things, which I have seen being imposed and developed very quickly in Colorado during a drought. You do not focus or discuss reclaiming water and really using it. There's no public comment on it. You have not for an entire year enforced draconic measures in water fines and water hogs. And so it's arrogant to say, well, we need it now because we're out of water. You also Ben Hornstein uses the excuse, well, it's an emergency, so you don't need environmental impact review. That is the lamest excuse I have ever heard. You need an environmental impact review. You have not included the Sierra Club. You have not included the Golden Gate Audubon Society. For example, there is an osprey nest. And those waters where you try to put the water station pumps are protected water areas. It's a water conservation. There's ospreys nesting there. So you really try to ram through a project with so many open questions. We have the same issue with the city council in Richmond, where it said, yeah, well, we iron out the details later. You need to iron out the details before you approve the project tonight, even in the basics, because I will chase the lawyers down with the Sierra Club if you proceed with the project. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Claudia. Ms. Barron-Hamill, please.
Thank you and good evening. A quick comment for your consideration regarding the cost of the material for the pipe. Since the pipe is made of materials traded in the metal commodity market where prices fluctuate, What price ceiling guarantee does Marin Water have if the price of materials goes up? And conversely, what savings agreements are in place if the price of materials goes down? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ed Jamison, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'd like to start with somewhere in that last presentation, there was a comment that we might be able to line up another 2 to 6 TAFs from Sonoma. That is absolutely nothing in the context of this crisis. It's less than 1 to at most 2 million gallons a day. We need something on the order of 22 million gallons. We can haggle over whether it's 21 or 23. A pipeline, if we ever get on with it, could provide 8. I know there are bottlenecks that haven't been broken. Sonoma may give us 4, but only 2 to 3 during the summer. We're short to 7 to 8 million gallons a day, even if we do the pipeline. If CEQA is an obstruction in the short term, that's a surprise to me. And I guess we are where we are. Last Friday, I'm sure I heard that we would be approving this pipeline tonight and ordering materials this week. I guess CEQA has delayed that somewhat, but it is absolutely irresponsible to not proceed with the pipeline with no further dithering. We have no choice. Do the numbers like I just laid them out. We have an inadequate supply even with the pipeline, and we also need to do the 3 temporary desal plants. We don't have a choice. I'll finish by saying I'm truly astonished at Ms. Kohler's continued obstruction to implementing this absolutely necessary project. Please do the numbers on the back of an envelope, board members. They're not that complicated, and they're absolutely appalling. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next speakers are Mimi Willard, James Krajewski, and then Rick Adler, please. Ms. Willard?
Yes, I have 3 questions. The first one, which I asked at the last board meeting, but it didn't get answered, and that is what is the difference in cost and impact on bridge users of putting the pipeline on the upper deck as opposed to strung off of the upper deck? Presumably it's more expensive to hang it off the upper deck. And in one or both instances, there might be disruption to traffic on the lower level or to bicycles on the upper level. So I think that this needs to be sunlighted. Secondly, when is there an actual contract for the water from the Central Valley? I think we were told like 6 weeks ago that it was going to be like the next week or something. Maybe I missed something there or misinterpreted, but I think that's important. Is there a contract, and what's the cost of that? And where's it coming from? And then thirdly, you're approving things, piecemeal to keep it moving along. But what's the total cost as it's beginning to unfold here? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Krajewski, please.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to address what I consider a kind of muddled message on water sources here. There was mention of desalination in the presentation and by some of the board members, basically arguing that there's not enough, desalination would not provide enough water or it's too expensive. But let's be clear, none of the solutions provide enough water and they're all expensive. So I just don't quite understand that message about desalination in the context of this discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krajewski. Mr. Adler?
Yes, I thank you. I think that now is not the time to spend so much money and all the time energy on the Intertie project as proposed, because there are several reasons why the pipeline will not provide emergency water if we have another dry year, but will become a drain pipe, draining away the money, attention, energy, and expertise that could be better used to build local, simpler water supplies such as desal, not through reverse osmosis, but through evaporation, condensation, and fog harvesting, and becoming a solar power generator. If we have another dry year and are desperate for Central Valley water, the Central Valley and its millions of people and thousands of farms
will also have another dry year and be even more desperate to keep their water, which is a result of the last 100 years of Central Valley water wars, has every drop of water from the top of the sky to the center of the earth contract is signed, locked up with 100 years of laws, rules, water rights, which will be used by their hundreds of water lawyers paid by corporate farms and industries. Any water we could buy in another dry year would probably be cheaper in bottles at Costco. Every project, small and large, takes more time and money than expected and planned. The intense water project, Intertype project, involves the close cooperation with dozens of federal, state, local, and water districts, agencies, water projects, water rights, towns, populations, all of, or any of which could complicate or even stop the project for their own diverse needs and parameters. So it can be reasonably expected that this pandemic era of inflation and supply chain problems cost twice as much and take twice as long as planned. So it may not be ready for next summer's drought. I think you should continue to plan the Intertype project as part of a long-term planning for new change climate for long-term water sources, as several of the directors have explained, but not to invest money now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The next three speakers are Warren Wells, Jan Diamond, then Laura Sheraton, please. Mr. Wells.
President Kohler, members of the board, my name is Warren Wells. I'm the Policy and Plan Director for the Marin County Bicycle Coalition. You know, we fully recognize the importance of the emergency intertie and understand the fact that such a project will entail some level of disruption to the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, being a highly constrained right-of-way. To this end, we were pleased to learn of the plan to place the pipeline below the upper deck rather than within the existing multi-use pathway. However, as stakeholders of the active transportation network, we were concerned to see that the eastern reach of the pipeline is proposed to be buried within the San Francisco Bay Trail between Point Richmond and Stenmark Drive at the bridge abutment. As you know, this segment of trail represents the only non-motorized access between Richmond and Marin, as well as Point Melati Beach and Point San Pablo Harbor. Again, while some disruption is no doubt unavoidable, we would like to second the suggestion made by Richmond Mayor Tom Butt that the pipeline be installed adjacent to the Bay Trail rather than beneath it. To ensure that people can continue to cross the bay without owning a motor vehicle or waiting for a bus, we urge the project team to take all feasible steps to maintain access to the bridge path and its approaches and avoid any multi-week or much less multi-month closures. And full disclosure, I'm saying this both in my professional capacity and as a Corliss resident of the East Bay who commutes to Marin via the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge by bicycle. I realize it's a challenging project on a constrained timeline, but I urge you to recognize the critical importance of our multimodal transportation network and not use it as the default construction zone because it's the path of least resistance. Thank you all very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Ms. Diamond, please.
Yeah, I'm just speaking as a resident of Point Richmond, and it just seems really almost disingenuous that the planning has gone on so far, has gone on this in depth without appropriate Richmond input. And I understand that there's a lot of promises saying, well, we can just approve, this is kind of a rough draft, and if you approve it, we'll fix it later. Like, oh yes, we put 3 pump stations right near downtown residential Point Richmond, but if you approve this, we can look at other places. Instead of initially, it would seem so obvious that these pump stations should be placed in industrial areas. And it's clear from hearing the other speakers and what Tom Butt has put forth and Bruce Bayard that there's, we're clearly other places to locate the pump stations, as well as what it means to have the pipeline, the Bay Trail completely disrupted for God knows how long while they're burying the pipe underneath it. Since these things are possible, why can't those changes be made before, as well as let alone diesel pumps that are currently in the plan? I mean, diesel generators. Why can't those changes be made before you approve these plans, as opposed to sort of waiting on promises like, oh, well, we can fix those later?
Is that it, Ms. Diamond?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Oops. Miss Laura Sheraton, please.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak. I appreciate everyone who's working on this issue. I'm very concerned about the treatment of the Point Richmond area residents and the burden that is being placed upon them. I also want to concur with Frank Egger and those that want to protect on the board who want to protect the fisheries. I think it's absolutely critical that we look at the long-term effects of this decision and how it could come back to haunt us for decades. I'm also deeply concerned about the inability of Marinites to save water. I don't think that we've done a really great job. I'm looking at my bill and I'm averaging 30 gallons a day, me and my husband. And I'm looking at my bills going back the last year, and we're 1/3 to 1/5 of what the average household is using, which is a really big disappointment that people can't do a better job. It is critical. And I think if we could realize that every bit that we waste is having an impact on the environment. The other thing that happened is that I received a bill from a retreat center, and it was in error. Somebody had made a mistake, and that bill is $7,370. And I'm just wondering how a retreat center could have that amount of a bill. And I'm, again, deeply concerned. Why are these places operating when those of us that are residents here can't even seem to get enough water and or misusing it? So yeah, whatever you can do to inspire people to save water. It may be too late, but yeah, I'm really not a fan of this pipeline at all. We get more rain than places all over Europe, and they've been doing it for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So we need to do much better. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The next three speakers are Councilmember Chance Cutrano, last four digits 8800, and Karen Buchanan, please, in that order. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, directors, president, and staff. My name is Chance Cutrano, he, him, his pronouns. I am on the Fairfax Town Council, but I'm just, so yeah, we're trying to pay attention to all the great things y'all are doing, and thank you for your service. And at the same time, I'm just reaching out as an individual citizen. And, I am just calling in to express my my grave concern. I know these are hard decisions to make, and at the same time, I do a lot of work in the Central Valley around the preservation of temporary wetland ecosystems and trying to maintain the Pacific Flyway and trying to maintain some degree of in-stream flow. And I got to say, I'm well aware of the way in which SoCal municipalities are buying up farmland, the way that lower Central Valley folks are moving up, orchardists are moving up to secure senior water rights, and really the next round of the water war is on. And I'm really concerned that we are going to be kicking the can down the road about the realities of the climate crisis and the unpredictability of precipitation here in Marin County by allowing ratepayers to just think that we have easy solutions to this crisis, when the real externalities are the exacerbation of the biodiversity crisis. And now listening to the callers, the ongoing equity issues with our neighbors to the east. So I know this is a hard decision. I really hope you all can put some guardrails on this prior to any step forward. Because I think that we are just perpetuating a fantasy if we think that this pipeline is going to really save us or placate us. So thank you all. I know this is a hard decision, and I appreciate y'all being here, but I just wanted to air some concerns prior to moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much, Councilman. I just want to express my appreciation for your taking the time to be here tonight, and we do want to work with you on this.
The next speaker, 8800, please. And then after that speaker, Karen Buchanan. Go ahead.
Hi, yeah, Nancy Okada, thanks for taking my call. And I basically agree with everything that Frank Egger, Laura Cheriton, and Chance Petrano just said. You know, you really are not being realistic about water as a finite resource. And you really need to have a CEQA done on this project, and to this evening to try and approve a CEQA exemption is just ridiculous. First of all, this will have many, many environmental impacts, and they really need to be documented. And the other thing is, you know, it's really disappointing that this board is refusing to put a stop to new hookups. And you bury the information about the new hookups in the general manager's report in a way that you can't even find it. And yet you're allowing more and more people to come and suck out, you know, through the straw, one straw of all our water, and you're asking us to continuously conserve, as well as, you know, pools and other things people have spoken about. So you really need to get realistic to be having water transported from one place to another. And the water market is hot, the general manager says. It's hot. Old people are selling water all the time. Yeah, we don't have any water to sell. This is paper water. This is a game. You have to get realistic. Chance is absolutely right. We have to start really conserving and look at the other areas. And the equity issue with Point Richmond is also very, very important. I hope that you will decide to say no right now and get your ducks in better order, because what they say, you know, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. And this is a really serious issue, and you are taking it as privileged Marinites that everybody points to, and that's not who we are. We are the public, and we are very, very concerned, and we want you board members to be concerned too, and do the right thing, and not approve a CEQA exemption when our environment is suffering so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Okada. Next speaker, Ms. Karen Buchanan, please.
Hello, Board of Directors. My name is Karen Buchanan. I'm a current resident of Point Richmond. I live about 3 blocks up the hill from Castro and Tewksbury, where the proposed pump station will be located. And I oppose the alignment along the Bay Trail, as I echo the comments of my neighbors and friends, Lisa Johnson, Jeff Ritterman, and Bruce Bayert. And the Mayor Tom Butt, that the alignment should be on the industrial side of 580 rather than the residential business side. Also, I think you need to make an effort to outreach to the Point Richmond Neighborhood Council. I'm on the board of the Point Richmond Business Association, and all the businesses of the Tewksbury stretch and downtown Richmond would be impacted by this. The neighbors would be impacted by the construction. So I just want to make sure that you do your due diligence with neighborhood outreach. I really appreciate the comments from Director Kohler and Director Schmidt about the diesel generators, and I'm happy to hear that that's not going to be the main power source, that it'll be either an option or not used at all. So thank you very much for that. And I appreciate that this is an emergency project and you're getting an exemption from CEQA because of that. But I really think you need to do your environmental due diligence as well. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. After Ms. Buchanan, we have Mr. Roger Roberts, Jean Severing House, and last 4 digits 1402. Mr. Roberts, please.
No comment.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, sir. Miss Jean, please.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to comment. I served for 7 years on the Caltrans Bicycle Advisory Committee and for the whole 9 counties of the Bay Area, so I'm quite aware of the Richmond Bridge Path and the wonderful work that's been done on the Point Richmond and Richmond side to complete the Bay Trail. There's also a lot of work coming along on the Marin side, which basically we've spent many years and millions of dollars to make this available to smooth the way for people to walk and bike in this area. And I'm dismayed to see essentially the water district looking at as if it's the path of least resistance to put pipeline, emergency pipeline or otherwise, into any of these extremely hard fought, hard won, and multi-million-dollar facilities. So that's number one. Number two is I lived through the 1970s drought and the pipeline going in, and I am a water district customer in Greenbrae, and the messaging was ultimately very strict at that time and very clear. You will not use more than such and such water. The messaging this summer has been, oh, everybody should reduce their water use, not you shall individually reduce your water by 40%. It really needs to be each person shall individually reduce their water use by 40% before any kind of a project like this goes forward. Thirdly, I join those voices in saying I'm concerned about going ahead with this emergency exemption from CEQA on what I'm hearing tonight for the first time is not a temporary pipeline, but a permanent pipeline. That seems incredibly wrong to go that way. The biggest issue that I see in Marin is that we really seriously need to provide our own reclaimed water and our own desalination here in Marin. Buying water from Sonoma has been a great asset, but we don't always have that opportunity, as we've seen. I'm dubious about tying into the State Water Project, very dubious. The water coming through the Delta when it gets purified is so, it's reused sewage, so it's full of halomethanes. So that's what we're going to tie into. So please, let's just talk about reclaiming the water we have here, put millions of dollars into pipelines for recycled water, and let's get a permanent desal plant going. And please vote no on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last speaker I have is 1402.
James Holmes, Larkspur. I'm sympathetic to many, if not all, of the concerns expressed, but in the aggregate, we see again the typical multiplicity of objections that so often lead to delay or inaction. We face exigent circumstances which justify measures that might otherwise require more time and deliberation. Time is not on our side. On balance, it's better to act, even with reservations and with some reluctance, than to wait and deliberate indefinitely. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no further speakers.
Okay, thanks, Terry, and thanks to everybody who participated. We obviously have quite a wide range of views from various folks. I'll say for me, I want to make a special thanks to our neighbors in Richmond. I completely sympathize with your views. I just want to offer my own personal apology that we didn't reach out sooner. I think that was an error on our part, and I think we should own that. That said, I do think there's opportunity for us to work with you and find paths forward. I do want to ask for myself, I'd like to hear from Ben and maybe other staff about the feasibility. There were a lot of concerns raised, but the one that is resonating, and I'm conscious of the time and how much more we have to do tonight. But I do think it's important that we hear from staff about the issue of the siting of these pumps in a residential and commercial neighborhood. And obviously we can't resolve that tonight, but I think it does behoove us to speak to that for the folks who took the time to come here, and the opportunities for looking at other alternatives in the industrial section.
We have heard as well, speaking for staff, those concerns and pointing to the alternative potential siting and routing. And while we certainly initially looked at all possibilities in a pretty rigorous effort to land where we did, we are going to go back And we are going to explore every opportunity to push where the project is further away from the residential area. And I don't have more than that, but by the next meeting, we will continually provide updates to the board and public on where we are with that assessment. And I guess that's all I have at this point. But we will take a very, very hard look at it.
Okay. I'd also like to request staff, there were a lot of suggestions, but the one that I really want to make, sort of make sure that we follow up on, there were suggestions that we connect with the Point Richmond Business Association and Neighborhood Association. I'd like to see that happen this week. Those are connections that should have been made already. And to the extent that we can do that, Terry, I don't know if we can capture or ask for some of the speakers to provide us with contact information if they would like to do that. Obviously, it's up to them. But there are a few speakers from Richmond who I think, it makes sense for us to be in touch with them and have follow-up meetings between them and staff and possibly some of the board.
Okay.
Okay, we need to bring this back to the board. Are there any further board comments on this item? And then we have to figure out how we are moving forward. Okay, we have a package of items for approval. We've heard a lot tonight. Do we have a motion?
Did the motion be for the packet? Is that the idea? Yeah.
I believe
Single
Molly, that's
motion?
how that's how it was.
There is a resolution in front of the board that was prepared by staff. That is the recommendation that we would ask the board to move the resolution.
Okay, I'll move the resolution. Second.
Okay, we're ready for roll call vote, it seems.
Director Bragman,
I'm gonna vote aye. I do hear all the comments, and ultimately we are facing exigent circumstances, and I think most of the board members feel the same way. I'm very concerned about circumventing CEQA on a project of this magnitude. But again, the question is whether circumstances warrant it, and the numbers don't lie. We're a little bit above 26,000 acre feet and dropping. So unless we act, we are taking responsibility for worsening or potentially creating a health and safety risk. So I'm not a big supporter of a pipeline, the pipeline. But what we're talking about is the health and safety of existing district customers. And I think we have to protect their interests. And in order to do that, we've got to move forward on this at this point, and at least prepare the way if need be. So aye.
thank you. Director Gibson,
We are clearly in an emergency here. I vote aye.
Director Schmidt,
I think Director Bragman said it correctly, which is truly that we are in an emergency situation, and in order to ensure that we have water to meet public health and safety, this is our only option to continue to pursue. But there are a lot of comments that we got tonight. I think there's a lot that we can do to address those comments and incorporate them. And I am very committed as one of the board members. I'm sure my other board members are probably in the same boat. We are very committed to doing everything we can to minimize the impact of this project. And we hear what people have said. And I am very concerned, as I said in my original comments, about this project. But given the dire situation we're in, I feel like it is our responsibility to take further steps to keep moving this project forward while still looking at ways to minimize the impacts of this project to the maximum extent we can. So I vote aye.
Vice President Russell.
I'd just like to thank the residents of Point Richmond for their comments. I'd like to also indicate that I used to live in Point Richmond and I still have a house there. I have a lot of empathy for the situation. And as an engineer, I will do my best to see that we address all of the issues that are being thrown out and discussed. And with that, I vote aye.
And President Kohler.
I want to concur with the comments of my colleagues on this. And I want to again thank our neighbors to the east. I'm sure this rings hollow. It's almost 10 o'clock at night and you've made really important points, and we are approving this phase of the project. I'm sure that's frustrating. I know it's frustrating. I've been right where you are. I work on water equity issues every day in my actual job. So I hope that you hear sincerity coming from us, that we are going to work with you on this. We are going to resolve these issues in ways that work for you. We're not going to simply mitigate. We are going, you have my commitment to the maximum extent that I can make this happen, that we are going to do everything that we can. Well, we're going to go beyond that. We are going to make this a positive thing and hopefully build a partnership with you that is constructive and productive. And I really do understand where you're coming from. And I do understand that this must be frustrating, but this isn't a final approval. We can change course, and we do have the opportunity to make this a good thing for you as well as for this community. So with that, I'm voting aye.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to item 6, which is authorizing the general manager to engage lead bond run on to move forward with the bonds, basically. This is an approval item.
Yes, good evening, President Kohler and members of the board. Yes, this does ask you to authorize the general manager to engage our underwriters for the bonds associated with the Untitled project and with some other projects that we are looking at bond financing for. So we essentially we're helped by Sperry Capital, Jim Gibbs and Martha Vujovic, who are on the line with us tonight. And they conducted an RFP, reached out to 5 underwriters. The ones that were not selected were Morgan Stanley, Citi, and Wells Fargo that did not respond. And their approach was the selection of co-underwriters. We're looking at Luke Capital as the lead underwriter and Stifel Nicholas as the co-underwriter for this issue, as it is a very large issue. And that will give us more marketing capability on such a large sized issue. We did like the proposal from Luke. We talked with the board previously about financing for this project, and we are looking at alternatives to that financing. One of the things that they recommended that would allow us some flexibility in that is a shorter call option. So the bonds, at least a portion of them, will be callable in 3 years, which means that if we got to a point where we identified and were able to secure alternative financing, that would give us a point at which we could defease bonds and use that alternative financing on these projects. And as pointed out in the staff report before you, Stifel has worked with the district previously on the 2016, 2017 issues. You can see the pricing in there. Both were very competitively priced. So our recommendation is to allow the general manager to engage Luke Capital as the lead underwriter and Stifel Nicholas as the co-underwriter. And we can take any questions that you have at this point.
Sorry, do we have board comment on this item?
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. Especially appreciate the early call. That's a good thing to add in there. You've done a great job. Thanks.
Okay.
What are the interest rates now, Chuck? Are they still favorable?
They are still favorable right now, and we don't expect them to move too much by the end of the year. But yeah, rates are favorable.
How do they compare to our existing bonds? Are they a little lower?
Jim, do you want to jump in on that?
Yes.
They're lower.
Do you want to elaborate, Jim?
So we've, in the past, we've done issues with, all-in interest rates of, 4.5%, 5%. We're looking probably at less than 3%.
Boy,
It's a great time. It's a seller's market.
yeah.
Okay,
Great time for you.
that's helpful. Thank you. Any other board comments on this item? Okay, Molly, I think we may as well just go forward with the public hearing unless there's an objection on the part of the board. I think it's probably constructive for us to move this forward.
Okay, President Kohler, I think I do see some public comments on this, and then I think we do actually need a board motion and a vote on the underwriting item.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was assuming the public hearing was on the underwriting item. No. Oh, that's on the adoption of the ordinance. Sorry, I'm
That's correct. That's on
tired.
the ordinance.
Sorry.
I
Do we have
understand.
my eyes are glazing over. Do we have a motion and a second on this item?
Are we going to have public comment first?
I was just asking if we had a motion and a second, and then I was going to go to public comment. Sorry. But okay, public comment on this item.
Okay, if we're going to public comment, I have 4.
Okay.
The first one is Ed Jameson and then Mimi Willard, please. Mr. Jameson.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Right, thank you. I would just like to know, I'm all for authorizing the retention of an underwriter. And my only question is, have we defined the scope of the bond issue? Is it strictly for the pipeline and associated measures? Or does it include a slush fund for general conservation measures going forward several years of unidentified content? I think the latter would be inappropriate. I think we need to focus on the pipeline and have a clean issue. That's my only comment. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Willard.
Yes, I'm going to try asking a question again and see if this time I actually get an answer. My question is, did MMWD solicit competitive bids for the underwriter and any consulting help? And if so, what were the relative competitive bids? And if not, why not?
Thank you, Ms. Willard.
Can we get an answer?
Absolutely. Would you like me to answer that, Director?
Please.
Yeah, so it's spelled out in the staff report, and I think I covered it. We actually sent this out to 5 different underwriters. It was sent out to Loop and Stiefel, who were awarded it, or who we will engage for it. And then we also sent to Morgan Stanley, who did the last refunding issue with the city, with the district. It went to Citi and it went to Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo did not respond to the issue. And then on the topic of pricing, Stiefel and Loop were either at or the lowest of the prices by the 4 that responded.
Thanks a lot.
The next 2 speakers, Roger Roberts, then Rick Adler, please. Mr. Roberts.
I'm curious as to the structure of the bond issue. Will there be grace periods? Will there be interest-only periods? Will it be an even payment throughout the 30-year period? Will a 20-year bond be more attractive than a 30-year bond because you'll save interest? I'm curious about how the actual bond will be structured and why.
Jim, can you address that?
Sure. The way we have considered doing this so far is level debt service for 30 years, which is the way we've done, all the bonds in the recent past. For a district that has a very, very high credit rating, but is concerned about cost pressures, the wise thing is to go long, 30 years.
Yeah.
The interest rate will be low and the payments will be low.
I think I would just add, Roger, that it also advances intergenerational equity. This is assuming this goes forward, which again, we're not committed to. This is a big piece of infrastructure that's going to last for a long time. And at least from my perspective, having ratepayers, spreading that cost among the generations of ratepayers that are going to benefit makes sense, not just financially, but from an equity perspective. There's no reason to be putting more of those costs on people, currently within the next 20 years when you've got a piece of infrastructure that's likely to last for 40 years or more.
Last two speakers, Mr. Adler, then Councilmember Cutrano, please. Go ahead, Mr. Adler.
Yes, thank you. I would be in favor of the bond issue if the money can be used for other projects in case the Interdrive project is canceled or stopped or runs into other problems. If the money can be used for other necessary projects or even paying off the higher price bonds, and I would be in favor of it.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Cutrano, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you all again for hearing me this evening. As prior speakers have mentioned, I wanted to alert the board to the fact that the Marin County Council of Mayors and Council Members has recently established an ad hoc working group on water issues, and I will be serving on that along with colleagues throughout the county, and we're going to be trying to put our heads together on what we can do to help y'all achieve conservation initiatives and conservation goals. And one of the things that we've been thinking about in Fairfax is how best that we may use our ARPA funds on water-related issues. And this will come up, I'm sure, at the ad hoc meeting that will occur next week, where we'll be talking about regional initiatives and potentials to pool dollars to get the biggest bang for our buck. And I'd hope that there's an opportunity within this bond issuance to have some flexibility to have matching funds or something like that with municipalities if we do try to ratchet down with some progressive ordinances around water conservation for new development and things like that, or even retrofitting for that matter, or better incentives for cash for grass programs. But would hope that there's some flexibility in that bond issuance that could help us help you. So thank you very much, and I look forward to collaborating with y'all on that, hopefully in the not so distant future.
Thank you, council member. I just want to really appreciate your making those points. I know you weren't able to be at an earlier meeting, but we do have a commitment that, and I think for the first time, Jim, you can correct me on this, we are committing to having some amount of this bond issuance be available for consumer incentives to promote, to really invest in a meaningful way, more significantly than we have to date in water use efficiency measures. So we are very much aligned with where you're coming from. I don't know, Chuck or Ben, if you guys want to respond to that.
And President Kohler, two of the speakers had asked about the projects that would be in the bonds, and we are coming to the board in the November 12th Finance Committee to talk about what proceeds from the bonds will be used for.
Terry, do we have any further public comment on this item?
There are no further speakers.
Okay, then we need to bring this back to the board. I think we are looking for a motion.
Before we do that, Jim, could you explain what the 3-year redemption is?
Sure. The norm when you sell municipal bonds is to have what's called a 10-year call. That is, you can't use funds on hand to pay bonds before the maturity date until they've been outstanding for at least 10 years. Loop Capital, having researched staff reports in past meetings, noticed that there was a concerted effort by the staff to see if there are subsidized loans, capacity, or grants. And the reference to ARPA is right on point. You know, it may be possible for you to find material amounts of money that are free or much cheaper for you than the bonds. So Luke said, look, you know, with what we've been doing recently, it's not going to cost you much in premium to take a portion of this bond issue and allow it to be called or paid off early within after 3 years instead of after 10 years. It's a terrific idea. And, you know, if there is success in finding other better sources, we use those sources to pay these bonds early and reduce the cost of the funding overall.
So it gives us some flexibility as far as reacting to favorable market conditions that may occur.
Absolutely.
Okay.
President Kohler, I just wanted to briefly respond to your most recent remark and confirm to you and others that with your encouragement, it has taken staff some time to understand the innovative approach of how we could use these bond proceeds. And we look forward to the discussion, as Chuck noted, of bringing to the board a suite of options for the board to deliberate of what this bond offering looks like. And just personally, I do appreciate where you have come from and where you're driving staff. We need to ensure, as we've heard from the board tonight, that this is not infrastructure to bring in more water for business as usual. And we need to demonstrate our commitment, ongoing and long-term, for using water wisely and conservation. And this bond offering is one of many, many paths and initiatives that we are going to be tackling and developing going forward. So I think that's going to be a good discussion. And I think it's the right thing to do. And I look forward to that.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Are we ready for a motion on this item?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, Terry's roll call vote.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Vice President Russell,
Aye.
and President Kohler.
Aye. Okay, Molly, we are opening the public hearing. I never get this quite right. Are we doing the presentation first and then we open the hearing?
Correct, President
All
Kohler.
right.
If we
Item
want to
7.
proceed.
Item
Yes.
7 is adoption of an ordinance for mandatory water conservation measures, additional measures. So we're going to have a hopefully very brief presentation. It's after 10. We're a full hour behind schedule. So, and you guys do great slides, but we're going to need you to move it along.
All right, I'll try and keep it quick. Carrie Pollard, Water Efficiency Manager. We're going to cover the review of the current water use limitations and penalties that the board adopted on September 21st. Then we'll go into the key elements of the proposed ordinance, talk about implementation, and wrap up with recommendation. So the water use limits and penalties, like I mentioned, were adopted on September 21st. They do become effective December 1st. We want to talk a little bit about who is impacted from these water use limits. So this is single family residential customers. They'll be allowed to use water during the winter billing periods in tier 1 without penalty. And then as I transition into summer, which would be May through November, they can use tier 1 and tier 2 water without penalty. Otherwise, our tiers 2 and 3 water use during those summer months will be penalized. Adjustments are built into the adopted ordinance for households greater than 4. The limits also would impact our irrigation customers, or are designed to impact our dedicated irrigation customers. All winter water use would be penalized, and then summer use would only be allowed in tier 1. For our commercial and multifamily customers, the water use limits and penalties only would impact them if they have a dedicated irrigation meter. So sites with a mixed use meter would not be included in these limitations. And this proposed ordinance is designed to bring some consistency across the board for all of our customers, specifically around looking at winter irrigation. So starting with diving into the key elements of the proposed ordinance. The summer irrigation restrictions, which we are currently in, would be enacted from June to November, would stick with the 1 day a week of overhead spray irrigation, which we've had on the book since July, and then also allow for 2 days a week of drip. Spot watering would be exempt, and we would discourage new plantings. But as we transition to winter irrigation, which would be in December, we're proposing that all irrigation be prohibited. So spot watering would continue to be exempt, and we would continue to discourage new plantings, but this would really impact and affect all of our customers equally, if you would. I do want to note that this does take away some flexibility for our residential customers to, shower less and have more water for their landscaping, but we recognize that based on the current water supply conditions, we need all the savings we can get from all of our customers across the board. And the exemption around spot watering, we feel would be appropriate, especially recognizing the early rains we're already getting. Moving on, another element of the ordinance is prohibiting pool filling with districts' potable water. So we would actually add a non-essential use application or provision to the water waste prohibitions that would not allow potable water from the district to be used for filling a completely drained swimming pool or an initial filling of any swimming pool with an application for a building permit was made after December 1st, 2021. That December 1st date was established in coordination with our local planning jurisdictions. Through many conversations, they agreed that the December 1st date was realistic, and they realized why staff is proposing taking these steps and are supportive of assisting us with implementation and notifying customers as they come in for a building permit of these new restrictions. Additionally, the penalty for pool filling is proposed to be set at $250 without a warning letter. This is slightly different, recognizing that giving someone a warning letter when they're filling their pool, it's highly unlikely that they'll be filling their pool again, and we want to be able to address it upfront when the violation occurs. Furthermore, there's water waste enforcement period is also a proposed change within this ordinance. The current code states that there's a 14-day violation period, which means that if we see a violation occurring, the same violation occurring within 14 days, staff can take action. But if it's outside of that 14-day period, the whole process completely restarts. And this proposed change would allow for a violation occurring within 1 year for staff to be able to take action. And the process doesn't change. We'd still do the notification, the second notice, and then any subsequent violation, but the timing for taking action would be shifted. This change is being proposed based on experience that we've had from our water waste enforcement or water waste patrols. We're tagging homes in October that we also had tagged in July and August, but it had been beyond the 14-day period, and so we couldn't actually take action. They're just sending, basically they're getting a water waste notification letter over and over and over again outside of that 14 days. And so we wanted to have something that provided a little bit more meaningful response to those situations. And implementation. So we'll continue with customer outreach and education, which are currently underway, recognizing that staff is proposing or preparing a direct mail to all of our customers in light of the water use limitations, and this would be rolled into that outreach as well. We will continue to work with our local planning and land use jurisdictions around implementation of the pool filling item. We continue to push our drought support programs, especially as we move into winter, looking at flume and rain barrels. It's a great opportunity to get folks to take advantage of those. And then the variance and appeal process will remain in effect as it is designed for all of our other water waste prohibitions that are currently adopted. So finally, the recommendation is to adopt the proposed ordinance, which would put a prohibition on winter irrigation, allowing for spot watering and discouraging new plantings, and then also adopt a pool filling prohibition. With that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you for that, Carrie. That was awesome. 6 minutes. You win the star for tonight. Board comments on this item?
Why don't we cut off irrigation November 1st? Why wait until December?
Yeah, the thought was to align it with our with the water use limits that were also adopted that go into effect December 1st. And December 1st is also when we move to our winter billing period. So it just, the timing seemed to align nicely. Of course, our outreach would start immediate and we would hope to get folks to take action even sooner than December 1st.
I mean, I also think a $250 fine for pool filling is inadequate, really. That should probably be $1,000. It's a lot of water.
So that's an interesting proposal. I want to hear from the board on other comments, but Larry, are you proposing to amend the ordinance from $250 to $1,000?
I would.
Okay, that's concrete. Any thoughts on that one way or another? I mean, I'd support it. Any other board comments on that in particular or other aspects of the proposal?
I would support that if there is, I mean, we're going to find unusual circumstances, so there should be a variance approach.
I think our regular variance process just applies, right, Carrie?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So we don't need a separate piece. I mean, we have a variance process in place.
There's also an appeals process for those who are maybe fined incorrectly.
I would support it certainly with those conditions.
Okay. Other board comments on this item and on Larry's proposed amendment, friendly amendment? Okay. So I think this is the kind of thing we can just amend on the fly, right, Molly?
So I'm sure we want to take public comment first and open a public hearing and all of that, but I will speak to the fact that that's a numeric change that I can interlineate and we can make that change if that's where the board wants to go. Yes.
Right. That I'm trying to establish that before we go to public comment, so the public has something specific to comment on.
Excellent. Thank you.
So I believe the way this works is with that proposed change, I'm now opening the public hearing. Correct? Okay, we're opening the public hearing. And Terry, do we have any comments?
Yeah, we have 5 comments. The first one, Roger Roberts, then Ed Jamison, please.
Yes,
Go ahead.
you can hear me, I trust.
Yes, sir.
Larry, thank you for increasing the pool filling charge. I think that's utterly appropriate. As for the penalty rates elsewhere in the proposal, I think they are far too lenient. And $250 is not really sending the message. And I would at least double all of those rates in order to make it clear that we're serious about water waste. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jamison?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great, thanks. The proposal to ban drip irrigation in favor of using a hose, if that's what you're talking about, is misconceived and needs to be eliminated from consideration. Hose irrigation, or using a can, if that's what you're talking about as well, would use at least 3 to 4 times as much water as drip, which slowly places a few precious drops of water onto the root ball of each plant, whereas a hose gushes water onto adjoining soil areas with lots of runoff water just being wasted. A can would be similarly wasteful. Banning drip will result in significantly more water use, not less. This proposal needs to be scrapped. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next 2 speakers,
Can I
Claudia,
just
oh, sorry.
Can I just interrupt for a second? Carrie, do you want to address that? I think there's a lot of public confusion about this. I know that this is sort of a tenant in water conservation, across the West, but I think it would be useful for you to respond to the comment that we're doing the opposite of what we think we're doing. I think we probably should clarify that.
Sure. So what the proposal for hand watering is not meant to be to put a hose out and just walk away from it. It is to specifically spot water plants that are, experiencing high levels of stress that need an additional, an additional drink here and there. It's not meant to supplement any long-term irrigation, right? Especially in light of the rain that we're seeing, right? Whereas we move into the wet shoulder months, irrigation should be off anyways at this point. Hope that helps.
Thanks, appreciate it. I'm sorry, Terry, go ahead.
No problem. Claudia, then Rick Adler, please.
So this brings me back to my initial comment earlier. Larry Bregman brought up, why do we not start in November 1st? And then Carrie says, well, it fits nicely with our plan. How arrogant is that? Are you in a water emergency that you don't need an environmental review, but you still can kind of let people irrigate their lawns in November? The same is the fines. If people use water hoses, I have friends in Marin, I have clients in Marin, they will spend an hour using the hose. So this whole proposal by Ms. Pollard is misguided and not functioning unless it is really serious and a bit more draconian. Again, you don't show serious efforts in conserving water. You don't prove that you're really in a water emergency as you try to make us believe with saying you need the pipeline. It's like one brain does not see what the other brain does. Please adjust the proposal and listen to Larry Bregman and increase the fines and remove hose watering. Unless plants die, people will not understand that you in Marin have actually a water crisis. I hope I made myself clear.
Thank you, Claudia. Mr. Adler, please.
Yes, thank you. It's probably not in the flow, but I'm just going to throw it out there. I have a lot of people in my neighborhood that just moved in, are quite wealthy, have these automated systems. Their lawns are bright green, growing, and I don't think they even know where their water system is turned on or off. I don't think they pay any attention to it at all. They seem to be quite wealthy, quite busy. And if I was to report them as water hogs, could I do it anonymously? Because I don't want to get on their bad side.
Thank you, Mr. Adler. The next two speakers, Baron Hamill and then Nancy Okada, please. Ms. Hamill.
Thank you again. Over the last several months, I've been challenging the benefits of allowing golf courses to irrigate greens and tees with potable water in the time of an historic drought. At a board meeting several weeks ago, a board member mentioned in passing that an irrigation variances for golf courses would be looked at. I'd like to hear what will be done about this in the future, in the face of our current circumstances, not just for now as we go into the rainy season, but next spring and summer when residents will be prohibited from irrigating their garden. Second, I visited several garden stores, nurseries recently, and they're selling plants with no signage whatsoever about the drought. Moving forward, where Marin water is discouraging new plantings, my recommendation is that you prepare a program to work in support of and in conjunction with those retail outlets to generate awareness about planting and watering restrictions. And with regard to irrigating with a hose, watering plants, spot watering by a hose, my own experience is that in the last 2.5 months, I've saved over 60% of my average water usage simply by watering by hand twice a week as necessary, instead of turning the irrigation system on twice a week. So spot watering by hose saves a tremendous amount of water. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hamill. Ms. Okada, please, then Mr. James Holmes.
Oh, hi. Thanks for taking my comment. I just want to say again, in your urban water management plan, you talked about when the reservoirs reach a certain level, that you will look at putting a moratorium on new hookups. Putting all these fines and everything in place are a great idea. People still really don't get the idea. And once again, you are continuing to allow new hookups. It's time for you to put a moratorium on new hookups. You have that in your urban water management plan, and it needs to be done because adding more customers to your customer base to have more water means less water is available in the future. So you're draining your reservoirs even faster with all the new hookups. And we have no idea from any of your documents what these new hookups are pulling in terms of water usage. They're for huge homes, monster homes. I know a home near me is going in that's going to be hooked up. New developments, hey, just bring them on, okay? You need to really put a stop to the new hookups. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Okada. And Mr. Holmes, please.
James Holmes, Larkspur. As a hand waterer myself, I just want to speak up for that as a reasonable way to balance the concerns for conservation and at least minimal landscape preservation. I know that in my neighborhood, people used to water, most people used to water by hand. Now, nobody does except me. So there is minimal, I think maintaining the exemption for hand watering will have minimal effect in terms of expanding supply. I just finally, I'd like to say that the board keeps adding restrictions and penalties, and I understand why, and I appreciate that. But the more that they do that makes it all the more significant that the board must also provide the carrot of plausible, comprehensive plans to increase supply to go along with the stick of restrictions and penalties. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There are no further speakers. Oh, I'm sorry, actually, one more caught on. Mimi Willard, please. Oh, Ms. Willard, did you want to speak? Yes, okay, hold on. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Willard.
So I think that one of the fundamental problems with the approach that uses penalties is that it's a blunt instrument. And the sharper instrument is the rate structure, which you can't change overnight, but was unfortunately changed in the wrong direction going back 2 years ago, such that most of many people's bills is completely untethered from the amount of water that they use now that we have very large fixed charges from the new capital maintenance fee and the increased watershed management fee on our bills. So my bill, for example, I'm worked hard to get my usage down. I'm in tier 1, but now over half of my water bill comes from fixed charges. And maybe some super large users are price insensitive, but your average customer probably is price sensitive. So if you went back to charging people for the amount of water that they use rather than a fixed charge, you, I think, would have a much better tool for controlling behavior in times of drought. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Willard. There are no further speakers.
Okay, Molly, so I need your guidance here. I believe what I'm doing now is closing the public hearing.
You've got it
And I'm
exactly
looking
right.
for a motion to adopt the ordinance 455 as amended by Larry Bragman's suggestion.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay, we need a roll call vote
So if I might just make sure that I'm very clear on the change is in section 13.040401C, where we're talking about a fine for filling swimming pools, would be changed from $250 to $1,000.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for allowing me to clarify that. Okay.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Vice President Russell,
Aye.
and President Kohler.
Aye. Okay, we are now getting to the regular calendar. No, we're gonna move this fairly quickly. Item 8 is authorizing a professional service agreement. Ben, tell us what this is.
Yeah, so Chuck has that item where it will be very quick. It's a relatively routine item. Chuck.
Yeah, President Kohler and the board. This is just updating. We had a contract with Quintel NC before it's expired. This is renewing it. Part of the purpose for this is we need some staff augmentation also, as we have one of our business systems analysts out. And this just, they do things like updating the penalties within SAP for us. That's the kind of work they do for us. And
Okay.
That's my
Do we have
report.
board comment on this item. Terry, do we have, oh, sorry, go ahead, Larry. No, okay, sorry, it looked like you were gonna say something. Terry, do we have any public comment on this item?
Not on this item.
Great, do we have a board motion on this item?
Move approval.
Second.
Second.
Okay, Terry.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Vice President Russell,
Aye.
President Kohler.
Aye. Ironically, we are skipping item 9, streamlining board meetings, and we're moving to item 10, the request to fill a senior comms position. This is an approval item, and my understanding is that this is a budgeted item. This
Yes,
is not
this is a recommending we proceed with a internal recruitment process for a senior communication specialist with the expectation that one of our 2 existing communication specialists would be able to compete for a promotion. And this has been a longstanding item organizationally, that it would strengthen our comms team, our small but mighty comms team, and have that mid-level position that would be able to work more independently and take on challenging assignments. So I think that it's will not add a position because it's an internal recruitment, and a very modest change to the salary reflecting the higher level of responsibility in this position.
Okay. Do we have board comment on this item? Okay. Terry, do we have public comment on this item?
There are none.
All right, then we need, I'm looking for a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Gibson,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Vice President Russell,
Aye.
and President Kohler.
Aye. Thank you so much. We are now at the end of our, well, essentially at the end of our agenda. We're just talking about future meeting schedule. I don't think there's anything significant changed, right?
Well, I do want to bring to the board's attention that Chair Russell had requested that we move the Operations Committee meeting to 9:30 a.m. instead of 6 p.m. 9:30 is our typical time, but based upon your feedback, it seems majority of you can attend that. I just want to confirm with those of you who haven't confirmed.
I'm sorry, which day is this, Terry?
It's the October 26th, next Tuesday.
October 26th, the next Tuesday.
At 9:30 a.m.
I am not available at that time. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, you want to move it to 9:30 or you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm not available at that time either.
Okay. It's up to you, Ben. Take it away.
I will share with the board the draft agenda. It'd be my inclination to proceed. I think the board will see that the items are generally updates. I glanced at it, so Why don't we not nail it down tonight? Just one more loop so the board members that won't be able to make it would be comfortable with a debriefing following the meeting.
Okay. That's all I have.
All right, well, I think we're at the end. Thanks, everybody, for your participation, and we'll do it all again soon. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.